In episode 35 of the CySec101 training series, we're going to go through the introduction to Hydra. Now, Hydra is a password hacker or a password cracker, and this is a part of the offensive security tooling module that is a part of the Cybersecurity 101 pathway of TryHackMe. And there's a lot of really cool tools for offensive security. This is literally just an introduction to all of these things because, again, we're a part of Cybersecurity 101. We will be doing the Junior Penetration Tester and then Pentest Plus, where we really start using a lot of these tools in more advanced scenarios and capture the flag exercises, so on and so forth. But for this specific video today, we have literally two tasks. The first one is just the introduction to Hydra, and then the next one is a few exercises that we have for just running the Hydra commands and then capturing a couple of flags and transferring or translating, cracking a couple of hashes at the end of this whole thing. So it's going to be a good one. It's going to be a nice little introduction. If you've never used Hydra before, this will be the perfect introduction. And if you have used it before, this will be a nice little reminder. And if you're a part of TryHackMe, if you actually have a membership with TryHackMe, then you can actually use this room for free. So it doesn't require a paid membership, and you'll get access to the virtual machines as well as the attack boxes, and you'll be able to run all of the exercises that we're running through. So again, I think it'll just be a fun little exercise that we're going to be able to run together as an introduction to Hydra. If you'd like to support this channel, consider joining Hackaholics Anonymous, the premier community for security professionals and hackers. We have 4 tiers: the supporter, agent, guardian, and master. And each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The agent, guardian, and master levels, however, get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every single month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below, or you can go to our homepage and click the join button there, or you can go to youtube.com/@hankhackshackers/join, and you'll be able to join Hackaholics Anonymous. Now, without further ado, let us jump into the Hydra introduction room. Hydra can run through a list and then brute force some authentication services. Imagine trying to manually guess someone's password on a particular SSH, or a particular service, which would be SSH, the web application form, file transfer protocol, simple network management protocol, so on and so forth. So we can use Hydra to run through a password list and speed this process up for us, determining the correct password. And according to their repository, it supports or has the ability to brute force the following protocols. So literally, I'm not going to go through this entire list. This is a massive list. If you want to pause it and go through the list, you most definitely can. You can also go to their official repository, which would be, of course, on GitHub. And this is a weird little introduction, or the way that displayed for us. The style sheet wasn't working for whatever reason. But this is the creator, which is the Van Houser. So if you go to Van Houser -THC, I don't know if that's for, for the weed element. And then you would go to THC-Hydra, or you can always just Google GitHub Hydra, and then you'll be taken directly to this. So this is the repo for it, and then there's a lot of information that you can read. And then according to the repository, it supports the following protocols as the current recording of this particular video. And so we have all of these things in here. So Cisco AAA, Cisco authentication, HTTP forms, and a variety of different HTTPs. Of course, we have SSH in here as well, and FTP, SMTPs, a bunch of different really common used protocols that we can actually use for logging into any given system. And that is what is perfect about Hydra, is that it can actually support all of these things, and it's an online password hacking or password cracking tool. So you can read more about the options of this. You can check the Hydra tool page, the Kali Linux Hydra tool page that's available for us. And then you can always refer to the manual, which I'm just going to do just to kind of display this for you. But it basically says essentially everything that you actually get to see here, as well as what's going to be covered inside of that manual. So this shows the importance of using a strong password. If your password is common or doesn't contain special characters and is not above 8 characters, it will be prone to be guessed. A 100 million password list contains common passwords. So when an out-of-the-box application uses an easy password to log in, you got to change it from the default password. That all of the default passwords for all of the major applications exist on these password lists. Okay, the RockU password list is one of those lists. It literally has tens of millions of passwords on there. And then of course there's the sec list repository that's on GitHub that has just a password list upon password list. So many freaking text files that just house tens of millions of common passwords. So the key here is to avoid common passwords. So I mean, there are so many different things that we can talk about. We did talk about this in the cryptography rooms or the cryptography videos for the CySec101 playlist that you're watching right now. And there are just so many of them. As an example, there's the CCTV cameras and web frameworks that often use admin as the username and then password as the password, and those are the login credentials. And most people, like majority of people who actually have CCTV cameras for their phones, like a Ring camera or something like that, they don't change these things, which is really crazy to think about, because depending on who that person is, you can technically hack into their cameras and use their cameras as a part of a botnet. You can display your whatever imagery you want on their camera or change their camera settings so that they can't see what's going on, and then you can break into their house. It's crazy. Like, there's a lot of things that you can do by simply being able to log into somebody's CCTV camera. So that's just one example. Obviously, I'm not encouraging that. It is a felony to do what I just described, so please don't do that. To install Hydra, it's already installed on the attack box, which is a version of Ubuntu Linux that we have. But if you download Kali Linux, it also comes pre-installed on Kali Linux and downloaded directly from the kali.org website. I'm going to be using the attack box that comes with this room. And again, this is a free room. So anybody that has just a user account with TryHackMe, no paid user account required, as long as you have that, then you can go ahead and use the attack box as well as the target machine, the victim machine that we're going to be using. So if you prefer to use the in-browser Kali machine, Hydra also comes pre-installed. As is the case with all Kali distributions, you can access it by selecting the Kali Linux or use Kali Linux and clicking on the Start Kali Linux button, which I didn't even know that actually existed here. I wonder if that's here. It doesn't seem to be. Huh. Interesting. I don't know what they're referring to, but it is quite interesting that there is a potentially a Kali Linux button, I guess, but I'm just using the attack box, which is Linux. It's just not Kali Linux. So, however, you can check the official repository if you prefer to use any other Linux distribution. For instance, you can install Hydra on Ubuntu or Fedora by using the apt package manager and do apt install Hydra or apt install Hydra, or then you can use dnf install Hydra or yum install Hydra. It just depends on which distribution of Kali or which distribution of Linux you're using, and the package manager changes based on the distribution of Linux that you're using. Apart from that, it's pretty much done with the package manager, and it's very easy to install. You can also download it directly from the THC Hydra repository that we just looked at right here. So you can actually clone this and you can download it on your machine and install it and have fun cracking passwords. So the intro is now out of the way, and now we can jump into the use of Hydra. All right, so I've already started the attack box, and I've also started the virtual machine that's available by clicking this button right here. This was previously a neon green, very similar to what we see at the top right here. So when you do that, it usually takes about a minute for the actual virtual machine, the victim machine, to start up. But then in this particular case, it can be up to 3 minutes to boot, which is, I believe it's going to be like a website that we're going to attack. So it takes a few minutes after the IP address has been assigned. It takes a couple of minutes after that for the actual website from the web server to boot so that we can start hacking into it. And then the attack box usually takes about like a minute and a half and 2 minutes for that to start as well. So I did that at the very, very beginning of this video. So it's already up and running for us, and it's available on the right hand side right here. I'm just going to click this button down here to turn this into full screen mode so that we can just work on the command line. And the instructions that we see right here, instead of reading through all the instructions and then applying them later on, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to start applying them. We're just going to run them in the command line so you can see what they look like. In this particular case, I don't think we can actually even run any of these things to be able to log in via SSH. Potentially, maybe we can log in via SSH. I don't know if this victim machine that we have over here has the SSH port open. If it does not, then it's all good. But I feel like it does, because even in the examples down here, it actually has the exact IP address that has been assigned to us over here. So I feel like the SSH is going to work. And then of course there's the post web form, meaning that we can make a post request to a web form, send data to a web form, and then we can do it with the various options that are available to us over here. So if I kind of zoom in a little bit here, these are the various options that we would be able to use to run Hydra from the command line and actually make a post request to a web form and then send data to it and then try to hack into the web form. So the questions that we have here is to use Hydra to brute force Molly's web password, and was flag 1, and then use to brute force Molly's SSH password, what's flag 2. So I'm just going to work on the SSH one first. Obviously we can do it because it says that we can do it. So we are supposed to get her SSH password. So first I'm going to do the SSH one because it's a lot more straightforward and it's literally the first set of instructions anyways. And then from there, we are going to run the command to be able to log into the web application as Molly. So let me I'll open this up in my second monitor, and then from there, we will go ahead and run this thing. Let's do it. All right, cool. So here we go. We're going to open up our terminal here. And this is what the terminal looks like. Obviously, if you've never seen one, I hope you've seen a terminal. If you've never seen one, then you should probably not be watching this, and you should go to the Linux Basics section of the CySec101 training series, which is like within the first 10 episodes, I would say, is when we went through all of the Linux fundamentals. And then there's a bunch of other Linux videos on here as well that were very well received, as well as the Linux Plus playlist, which is the official certification through CompTIA. And it's a very, very powerful playlist, and it teaches you everything that you need to know about Linux. All right, so that being said, this is our command line. So the very first thing I want to teach you is the man Hydra. So essentially, you just pull up the Hydra manual, and it gives you a bunch of stuff, including the description of it, and it'll actually go through the various options that you can run. And some of these options, or at least 2 of these options, is what we're going to be using today. Sorry about that. Usually when it ends and we can't scroll anymore, it makes that noise. So we can press Q to quit out of this thing, and we can actually officially run our very first command here, which is the Hydra SSH login command. And it's super simple. So everything starts with Hydra, obviously. -L, so a lowercase l, will be the username, one specific username that you would want to log into. So for instance, we are trying to log into Molly's account, right? So that was one of the questions that we had here, is trying to hack Molly's SSH password and then get the flag. So Molly would be the username. If you do a capital A, if you do an uppercase L, excuse me, not A, if you do an uppercase L, then you can feed it a list of usernames. In this particular case, we're just using one specific username, so we'll do a lowercase l. And then we would do a capital P because we want to use a password list. Now, in this particular case, I'm actually wondering which password list we would end up using, which could be a variety of different word lists. So before I do this, maybe let's see if there's a password list in our location right now. And there isn't. So if I go to desktop, there is also no password list here. So usually what we can see is inside of the user share word lists location, there's always passwords. And this is a very standard location inside of Kali Linux distribution installations, that there's actually a word list folder, and it has pre-installed word lists in here for you. So RockU would be one of the most common ones, so I'm probably just going to end up using this RockU word list as our password list. There's also the seclist repository that's also been installed over here for us. So if we actually go into the user share, or I guess I don't need to go into it, I could just do ls and then do user share word lists and then do seclists. Then we can see what's inside of the seclist folder, which has username lists, it has password lists, it has fuzzing lists that you can use for trying to do HTTP fuzzing or URL fuzzing. It has a discovery folder that can help you trying to enumerate subdomains or paths inside for any given domain. There's a lot of stuff that's available on SecList. So I'm just going to end up using the RawQ list that we have over here because it's the most easily accessible, and for the most part, the RawQ list has enough passwords in it that we could potentially just hack into Molly's account via SSH. So we will do Hydra L. We're going to do Molly as our username, P or capital P, and we need to give it the full path of the word list. So it needs to be user share word list, and then we'll do rawq.txt. So that's the full path of the word list. And then we're going to do the IP address, which is going to be 10.10.238.76. And then we need to do a T, and then we need to give it or T4, I guess, is just for the breakdown. So the number of threads that spawn. So 4 threads will spawn, meaning simultaneously there will be 4 attempts at trying to hack these passwords, because again, there's millions of passwords in there. So we wanted to try to, instead of just running 1 thread at a time, we wanted to try to run 4 threads. And then the very last thing that we want to give it is going to be the protocol that we wanted to hack, which in this case is going to be SSH. And then we just press enter, and then it starts working. And hopefully it won't take too long, but usually it takes a little while. So I'm going to just let this run, and we will try to see what happens. We'll try to see if we can get her password. All right, there you go. It took about maybe a minute, I want to say, some like minute and a half or something like that. So login is Molly, password is butterfly. So now we get to actually log in as Molly using the password butterfly, and that is very, very simple. So we would do SSH, and then we would do Molly at the IP address, which in this case is 10.10.238.76, and then we press enter. Then it says, this is the fingerprint of this. Are you sure you want to continue? Yes, I want to continue. And then it says enter the password. So I will now enter butterfly, and it doesn't get displayed onto the screen. So let me see. So it says 65 packages, last login, da-da-da-da-da. And oh, I am officially logged in as Molly. It changed because it's green. I thought it didn't work for whatever reason, but it actually worked. So this was my original login, and in this particular case, we have Molly, and we are logged in as Molly. So technically, I can just run ls, and there's a flag right there. So we can just do flag2.txt, and then there is the flag for that. And you just highlight this piece right here, right-click, copy, and then you can come out of it and then just go to the bottom right there and then just paste it as your answer for the SSH password. So now let's try to get the brute force of her web password. All right, for the web password, the command is a little bit more complicated, but not really. The best way that we can do it, or the best way that we can start this, is number one, we need to find the invalid response, because what it does is that it'll look for the invalid response as a tool or as a hint for it to know that, you know, whatever password that it used was not the correct password. And so as long as it doesn't see that invalid login response, so it, which usually is like, you know, you entered the wrong username and password or something like that, right? So whatever that invalid response is, we need to tell Hydra that when you do a incorrect login attempt, it's going to give us this invalid response. And once we have that invalid response, then Hydra will know that, okay, essentially, as long as I don't see this response, that means that the username password was correct. Right, so that's essentially it. We also need to find these fields for it. So the username field and the password field, it could be username or it could be user, whatever it may be. And we give it that. And then these uppercase portions that you see right here is where Hydra will actually embed the username that we give it, and then the passwords from the password list. So it'll enter the username here, which will, for us, is going to be Molly. So we'll still do lowercase l, and then we'll do Molly, and then uppercase P, and then we'll give it the password list. And then we give it the IP address. We're going to say that we want to do an HTTP post form instead of SSH as our attack. And then we have to, inside of this quotation right here, is what we need to give it as far as the username password combination for the arguments or the parameters that it needs to fill in. And then the username password portion that you see right here is going to be inside of these colons. And then we have the F for failed, which is going to give us, whatever the keyword is, which is in this case, I guess, the word incorrect. So what I'm going to do is, instead of just kind of assuming, I feel like there will be like some kind of probably the word incorrect is going to be in there, but I'm going to just get to that web page, and then from there I'm going to just put in incorrect login credentials just so we can see what the message is going to be, and then we'll use our own message. Or I feel like probably the word incorrect is usually what's available in like all of the incorrect logins anyways. So this is what we have. Username is going to be the field. Password is going to be the field. You can also right click on the screen. You can do inspect, and then you're going to be able to see the stuff that's on the page right here, which for us is going to be the form. And then when you have a login form, you bring that down, and then there's going to be, we see it right here. So it actually goes for, let's see, right here. So the form control type text, and we have the name is going to be username, and that's what we need to give Hydra. And then the same thing for the password portion. So if we have a password input, you would go over here, and then you see the name, which is going to be password. So that's what we need to give Hydra so that it knows what portion of the field it's trying to fill in. And then from there, we will give it the user, the capital user, and then the capital pass. And then from there, we'll give it the incorrect. So I'm going to do Hank, and then I'm going to do password, and then press enter. And then it's going to say your username or password is incorrect. So the keyword is incorrect. But technically, I could give this whole thing as the message for an incorrect login attempt. But for the most part, I feel like if we just put the keyword incorrect, then Hydra will know that whatever it was doing was the incorrect login attempt. So now that we have that information, and now that we've verified what fields we are using, for example, the username and the password field, now we can actually create our command, our literal command prompt that we have here. So again, it's going to start with Hydra. We're going to do -L for Molly, and then we're going to do $P, and then we're going to do user share word lists, and then we will do the rocku.txt. And then from there, we're going to give it the IP address, which is 10.10.238.76. For you, as you run this exercise, if you're going to use TryHackMe, they're going to issue you a completely different IP address. So it's whatever the IP address is that you were given when you entered this room. So that's what we did so far with the previous one as well. Now what changes here is that instead of doing SSH, we're going to actually do HTTP post form, and then we're going to craft the rest of it, which is this piece right here. So let me zoom in a little bit more just so you can see what we're doing here. So inside of the quotation, we're going to do /, which is the actual path that the login form exists on, which is just the root path of the website. And then we're going to do colon, then we're going to do username, which is our first field that we wanted to find. And then we're going to do /6, which gives us this up arrow. And then we're going to do a capital user and then do /6 again. And then we're going to say and, the ampersand, and we're going to do password, and that's going to equal the /6, pass in all uppercase, and then /6 again to create that for us. And then we will do a colon to wrap that whole thing up. And then it's going to be the failed message, which in this particular case, we'll just do incorrect because the keyword that's inside of that message is incorrect. And then we're just going to do a capital V here just to give us a little bit of a verbose output, just so we can see what's going on as it attempts to log in. And I have my full command now created, so I can just press enter and let this thing run. Oh, okay, so here we go. It says the program Hydra is currently not installed. To run Hydra, please ask your administrator. That's interesting. So I wonder why. I literally just ran Hydra. So have I misspelled Hydra or something? Is that what's going on? Oh, yo, and you know what? It's because I'm logged in as Molly. That's what's going on. Okay, that makes sense. All right, so let's now exit. So we will do Control C, and we're still logged in as Molly. So we'll do exit, and I will now close that connection, and now I'm still logged in. So I'm back to root. Now I can actually rewrite that whole thing. Okay, there we go. The first time I accidentally pressed enter in the middle of it, and there we go. Now it's working. It's doing some crazy things, and login attempts, and then these are all of the different passwords that it's running through right now, which is an insane number of passwords. We're already at 1,000, and it's just going to keep going until it's going to find the correct password for us, and then it'll tell us what that correct password indeed is, and then we'll be able to log in as Molly. So I'll just give it a minute, and then we'll see what we can get. Okay, so here we go. The first time that I ran this, which is the last command that you saw me type, it went through, I think, like 15,000 different attempts, and it did not work. And the hint on this exercise says if you've tried more than 30 passwords with the RockU list, you did something wrong. And so I recreated the command. Pretty much the only thing that I modified was I put the full error message that we have over here as the actual response for the failed attempt, right? So if we look at that, it's going to literally, the command itself is right. Hydra, lowercase l, Molly, uppercase P, user share word lists, rocku.txt, and then we have the IP address, HTTP post form. Oh, this is the other thing that I also changed was I did /login instead of just doing / assuming that it is just the login page, because it is technically not the root page, it's technically the /login as the domain is concerned. And then I did everything else exactly the same. And then for the failed message, I just did your username or password is incorrect with the period, and then I closed out the last quotation. And after that, it actually worked after the 36th attempt. So the password itself was actually Sunshine, which I think was maybe earlier. Yeah, so it was technically password number 26, which was the correct password, which is Sunshine. So now that we actually have her password and we know what her username is, we can technically go in here, we can type in Molly, and we can do Sunshine as the password and log into this bad boy right here, and there is the flag. And so you just copy this thing like that, and then go to the exercise and then paste it as the response to the first question. And that's pretty much it. It's really not that complicated of an exercise, and this was not a long video at all. I think this probably breaks the record for the shortest video that I've ever done. And I really try to like over explain things and all of that as well. So I think for the most part, this is definitely going to be one of the shortest videos, or one of the shorter videos, I should probably say, just in case. I don't know, there might be something that's shorter than this, but pretty quick video. It was not a hard video at all. So as you just saw, Hydra is very easy to use. The only issue that was kind of with the second exercise that we ran was making sure that we actually use the correct path for the login page, and then to use the full error message. I don't know which one of those things was the thing that solved it, because I didn't test them alone by themselves, but I just made sure that was /login, because it actually said /login on the login page, and then I put the full error message, and from that was pretty much it. That was really all we had to do, and we were able to run both of these sets of commands, and we actually got a chance to use the Hydra password cracking tool, which is an online password cracking tool that you can use to crack the SSH password of somebody, as well as the web login password for somebody. So hopefully this was actually useful for you and you learned a lot from it. If you did indeed learn from this video, I do encourage you to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out, especially in this particular pathway, which is our CySec101 playlist. And then there's another one that's coming up that's it's probably in the next week or two, which is going to be the Network Plus playlist that's going to come out. And then right after that, there's going to be the AI for cybersecurity, which we will start integrating the various APIs of the various artificial intelligence tools that are available to a bunch of different security appliances. So it's a very, very powerful skill, and I think it's the skill of the future when it comes down to cybersecurity and tech and all of that. So that's all of this stuff is going to be happening. And again, if you want to get notified of that, make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, and then drop a comment as well if you have any questions, if what we did today didn't make sense, or if you weren't able to get the success messages that I got. Definitely make sure you just drop a comment, ask your question. If you just want to say hi in the comment section, or if you just want to say thanks. You can also say thanks by supporting this channel and joining Hackaholics Anonymous, the premier community for security professionals and hackers. We have 4 tiers: the supporter, agent, guardian, and master, and each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The agent, guardian, and master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every single month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below, or you can go to our homepage and click the join button there, or you can go to youtube.com/@HankHacksHackers/join, and you'll be able to join Hackaholics Anonymous. I really do hope I see you in the Discord servers. If not, I hope I see you in the comment section, and that's it. This is your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite network and system attacker/protector. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you. Love, peace, and chicken grease, and I will see you in the next video later. In episode 36 of the CySec101 training series, we're going to go through the GoBuster Basics room, which is a part of the offensive security tooling module that is inside of the Cybersecurity 101 pathway of TryHackMe. And GoBuster is one of the most powerful enumeration tools that we're going to get a chance to review. And we do have actually a pretty healthy sized room. There's a good amount of tasks for us. There's a good amount of information for us. So for example, the introduction to the tool, obviously the various use cases, and then we have directory file enumeration, subdomain enumeration, vhost enumeration. And then this is a subscriber only room, which means you need to have a paid subscription to TryHackMe, and there's a discount link in the description below that it'll give you $5 off your monthly membership. So all of that is available, but if you just want to download GoBuster, we will go through some basic introduction for installing it and being able to get access to it. So if you get any kind of Kali Linux distribution, even on a USB drive, like the live boot of Kali Linux, you'll get access to GoBuster on there, or you can just download GoBuster through the repository, or to download it as an application if you're using Microsoft Windows. So it's accessible. You can get GoBuster, and it's a very, very, very useful tool, very easy to run, and the functionality of it is super, super useful. So I'm really excited to actually go through this room with you. This is one of my favorite tools when it comes down to the concept of penetration testing and offensive security in general. And it's super useful. Once we go through it, you'll see just how useful this actually is. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun in this particular video, in this episode of the Cybersecurity 101 training series. So let us jump into it. If you'd like to support this channel, consider joining Hackaholics Anonymous, the premier community for security professionals and hackers. We have 4 tiers: the supporter, agent, guardian, and master, and each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The agent, guardian, and master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every single month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below, or you can go to our homepage and click the join button there, or you can go to youtube.com/@HankHacksHackers/join, and you'll be able to join Hackaholics Anonymous. Now, without further ado, let us jump into the GoBuster Basics room. This room focuses on the offensive security tool named GoBuster, and it's often used for reconnaissance, which is the very first step of the penetration testing or ethical hacking process. And we're going to explore how we can use this tool to enumerate web directories, subdomains, and virtual hosts. And this will follow a hands-on approach where you can actually follow along with the commands that we're going to run. And again, I highly recommend that at the very least, if you don't have access to TryHackMe, to download the GoBuster application on your machine and then run along with all of the commands that I'm going to run, so that we can essentially learn practically instead of me just doing these things and then you kind of watching and taking notes, or I don't know how you study, but I think hands-on experience is the best level of experience and the best way to learn things. So if you can get access to the tool, I would highly recommend it so that you can actually run along with these exercises with me. These are our objectives for this video today, with the basics of enumeration, what it actually means, how to use GoBuster to enumerate web directories and files, subdomains, and virtual hosts, and then how to use a word list, which is a really big concept when it comes down to pen testing, either for enumeration or password cracking or finding usernames, so on and so forth. So these are our objectives for this video training today. So here's the setup of this particular room that I am in, and for the intensive purposes of this exercise or this video, we're going to be using the environment that TryHackMe provides. You can usually use some kind of a dummy website to use GoBuster on so that you can enumerate paths or so on and so forth. So the CompTIA website is one that always gets scanned and they're pretty much used to it. TryHackMe is another website that gets regularly scanned and they're pretty much used to it. So you can find just a number of dummy websites. Google is another really big one. They always get scanned and they have a bunch of subdomains. So to be able to use GoBuster to just get all of their subdomains is not that big of a deal. So again, this could be just one of those things that if you're not using the TryHackMe website and the virtual machine that they give us, because they actually do give us a target machine, a victim machine. So if you're not going to use this machine, you can use Google, for example, as your target and then run GoBuster against google.com. So this web server hosts multiple subdomains, the one that they're actually giving me today. It hosts multiple subdomains and virtual hosts. And the web server also has two content management systems, also known as CMS. And these are WordPress and Joomla. So throughout this room, we're going to be using the attack box, which is another version of Linux that actually has GoBuster installed. And then we're going to be using GoBuster to enumerate the web server directory, subdomains, and everything else. So if you prefer to use your own machine instead of the attack box, you must be connected to TryHackMe VPN and have GoBuster installed. That also requires that you have a paid membership to TryHackMe, because if you want to access this room at all, you need to have a paid membership to connect to TryHackMe via the VPN to be able to run this room. You can go through the installation instructions for the GoBuster tool through their GitHub repository. And again, you could literally just Google GitHub GoBuster, and then you'll be able to be taken directly to this link. The location for this is the OJ creator and then /GoBuster. And then you can see this right here as well. It's github.com/OJ, capital O, capital J, /GoBuster. And then you'll be able to get access to the repo and then clone the repo, download the installation files, so on and so forth. So once you start the web server by clicking these things, everything else will actually start working. And then these are the key locations or the key elements that we need to keep in mind for this exercise. So we work in a local network with a DNS server on the web server. To ensure that we can resolve the domains used through this room, we need to change the etc system resolve configuration file. And so you open it up and you use this command to actually open it up. You remove the comment, I completely forgot. Oh, hashtag, that's what it is. You remove the hashtag to uncomment that line. So in front of the DNS portion, and then we add the 10.10.61.48 after it, which is the IP address that is assigned for our victim machine in this particular case, so that we can actually attack the victim machine. And then we save it by saving, and then you can enter the command sudo systemctl restart the system resolve, so that we can actually resolve the DNS domain names. And then once you do that, you should be able to look at the configuration file, and then it should have the DNS portion of it uncommented. So these hashtags that you see right here means that each one of these lines has been commented out, so they're not going to run in the configuration file. They're basically useless as long as they have that hashtag in front of it. Once you remove the hashtag, then that specific line becomes active, and now you're able to use it. So for example, DNS equals 10.10.61.48, and systemd is one of the key binaries that is inside of Linux. And so it's the specific configuration file for systemd is going to be inside of the etc directory, which is the directory that holds most, if not all, of the configuration files. So I assigned this to and okay, so well, I need to do that before I actually run everything. So let me just real quick open up my terminal so that I can actually run it. And then from there, we will run the rest of the exercise. And there we go. So that is my official configuration file. And I have commented or uncommented the DNS line, and I've added the IP address of my target machine to it. So we are good. And now I can click complete and we can move on to the next task. All right, so since we are going to mostly be running the actual commands, instead of reading through them and then going and running the commands, I'm just gonna open this up in my other monitor, and then from there, I'm just going to run the actual commands as I read through the instructions so you can see what it looks like, and we'll end up using the commands in a live environment. Real quick as an introduction, again, GoBuster is an open source offensive tool that's written in the Golang language. It enumerates web directories, the DNS subdomains, vhosts, Amazon S3 buckets, Google Cloud Storage by brute force using specific word lists and handling the incoming responses. Many security professionals use this for pen testing, bug bounty hunting, and cybersecurity assessments. Looking at the phases of ethical hacking, we can place GoBuster between reconnaissance and scanning. Before exploring GoBuster, let's briefly discuss the concepts of enumeration and brute force. So enumeration is the act of listing all of the available resources, whether they're accessible or not. For example, GoBuster enumerates web directories. Brute force is the act of trying every possibility until a match is found, and it's like having 10 keys and trying them all to unlock a specific lock until one of those keys actually fits. And GoBuster uses word lists for this purpose. So it'll literally go through every single line item of the word list to brute force every possibility until the word list runs out, essentially. So the overview is over here, and this is where we actually start running some commands. So instead of reading through these things, we might as well just run the command. So let me get over here on this side, and then from here, we'll be able to run the commands. And the first command that we need to learn is the GoBuster help command. And so this is GoBuster. Let me make sure it's even typing on the screen. I feel like I'm not even on the right screen here. So GoBuster -- help, and you press enter, and it actually brings up the help menu of GoBuster. And that includes all of the different flags that you can run, meaning all of the different options that are available, and all of the various modes that we can run GoBuster in. So these are the available commands, right? So the dir to actually use directory file enumeration, DNS to use DNS subdomain enumeration, fuzz, which uses the fuzzing mode, and it replaces the keyword fuzz in the URL with whatever is the word inside of the word list that you would use. GCS is the GCS bucket enumeration. Help would be, help about any given command. S3 would be Amazon S3 buckets. TFTP would be the trivial file transfer protocol enumeration. Version shows the current version. Vhost goes to vhost enumeration. And then we have all these different flags that are available for us at the bottom right here as well. So for example, the T flag, which is specifying the number of threads that you would run. V to go into verbose mode, and my rule of thumb is if the tool offers verbose mode, run verbose mode. And what that does is that as it's working, it just basically prints onto the terminal what it's doing and what the status of the tool is, and so you get kind of like a live feedback of what the tool is actually doing. So these are the various options that we have over here, and there are important options to keep in mind. Now, as we see on this side right here, there are a few things that they've actually taken the time to point out. So there's the T for, or the -- threads, basically does the same thing. And this configures the number of threads to use for the scan. So each of these threads sends out requests. So if you have one thread, it's working at its lowest possible capacity. If you have 10 threads, that means there are 10 threads running at the same time, which actually means it's working faster, right? So this number may be slow when using large word lists, so you can increase or decrease the number of threads depending on the available system resources that you're running. So if you have a good amount of RAM on your system or CPU power, then this will end up working pretty well. Default is 10, so I'm just going to leave it as 10. I'm not going to change that anyway. The -W is a really big specific option. This is the one where we actually use the word list. So you could do -W or you could do -- word list equals. And in this configures a word list to use for iterating. Each word list entry is attached to the URL that you included in the command. And then the -- delay is the flag that defines the amount of time to wait between sending requests. So this is in case you want to avoid being detected by their intrusion detection system or by their SIM, whatever it may be. So delay in a real live environment, you may want to avoid being detected. So delay would probably be a big thing that you would use. Sorry about the noise in the background. My neighbors have excessive testosterone and they get these stupid loud cars that are absolutely unnecessary. What's funny is that the car is so loud and you think it's running fast, but it's just loud for no reason. It's like a slow ass car and it's just loud. They installed it in a muffler just to make themselves sound tough. And it pisses me off because they do it randomly and it's like in the middle of recording. And anyways, I'm just venting right now at this point. --debug is the flag that helps us troubleshoot when the command gives us any unexpected errors, and then -O will be the enumeration results written to a file that we choose. So it's basically outputting the results for us onto a file instead of printing it onto the terminal. So these are some of the key flags that we have over here. So this is an example command. So you would do GoBuster and then you would do dir. So as we covered, dir is the directory enumeration mode. And then you would do -U to actually give it the URL that you want it to enumerate. And then everything after this specific URL is the directories that it's going to try to enumerate for us. And then we give it a word list so that it can go and try to enumerate. And then they're giving it 64 threads to run at once so that it works super fast. And assuming that the system that you're running can actually support 64 threads running at the same time, then you can definitely do that. So GoBuster dir indicates that we want to use this in directory enumeration mode. U will give us the URL. W will give us the word list that we're going to use. And we have a bunch of different word lists that are available inside of the sec list location, or for, I guess, inside of word list. So I'm going to double check to make sure that we actually have the dirb directory that's inside of the word list for us so that we can actually use dirbuster or GoBuster. And then T64 sets the number of threads that GoBuster will use to 64, which improves the performance drastically. Instead of running 10 threads, it'll run 64 threads and your response will happen much faster. So now that we have this, let's actually look at some of these questions here. So it says, what flag do we use to specify the target URL? And that would be the -U flag. And what command do we use for the subdomain enumeration mode? And that would be, I believe it was DNS that was doing subdomain enumeration. So let's scroll up a little bit. There's a significant delay on this virtual machine. I almost want to restart it, but I don't think I should. So yeah, DNS uses the subdomain enumeration mode. So the command itself is DNS. And there we go. So we got our first set of answers going here. And oh, I see I'm already zoomed in, so I can zoom out like that. And so we got it. I don't think I have to do any kind of enumeration yet. These are just kind of overviews for us to learn how to run GoBuster. So now that we have this, the first thing that I want to do before I go into the use case for file enumeration, I want to actually see what word lists we have available. So I'm going to run just the ls command and we'll do user share and word, let me see, I spelled that wrong, word lists. And then let's see what's in here. So inside of the word list directory, we actually do have the dirb and the dirbuster directories. And inside of those, there should be other files that are available for our given word list. So if I do ls user share word lists and then do dirb, we should be able to see what's inside of that. And we have, you know, the big list, we have the common list, we have indexes, we have the small list, mutations, Spanish, nice, and then vulnerabilities, stress, and others. And that's just one little list. There's also the sec lists repository, or the sec list word list. So I might as well just go into this specific location just to kind of show you what is available here. So if we go into the sec lists, let me make sure I'm doing this right. And so this is what we got inside of seclist. We have the fuzzing. So you remember you can actually run a fuzzing command or a fuzzing attack using GoBuster. So there's an actual directory that is filled with various fuzzing word lists. So if I go in there, we can actually see the types of fuzzing word lists that are available. And this could be, I mean, it's again, the seclist repository is massive. So you have the JSON, you have the digits, I guess. So you could actually use a variety of digits or a series of digits to have as your fuzzing attack category. So just in case, I don't know if it's a subdomain or if it's a directory that you're trying to fuzz, email top 100 domains extensions, Windows attack. There's so many. There's literally so many of them. And of course, there's the discovery portion as well. So there's a discovery folder, and inside of the discovery folder, usually there is web content, variables, SNMP, mainframe, infrastructure, and of course, there is DNS. So we can actually look at what is inside of the DNS directory, and then we can see that there is, you know, the subdomains, top 1 million subdomains, and this one specifically has 100 and 110,000. This one has 20,000. This one has 5,000. There is the name list. There is the DNS, JHADX, Deep Magic prefixes, bit, Quark subdomains. So again, very many options available inside of the seclist repo or the seclist directory for our GoBuster tool that we can run and do a lot of really cool enumeration attacks. So for now, I'm just going to use the derb location that actually has some word lists for this, and then we'll see if we get some results, and if we don't, we'll use seclists. All right, the first use case for GoBuster is going to be the directory and file enumeration, and this is done using the dir mode that we saw on the help menu. So this allows us to enumerate website directories and their files, and it's useful when you're performing a pen test and would like to see what directory structure of the website is and what files it contains. So directory structures of websites and web apps follow a particular convention, making them susceptible to brute force using word lists. For example, the directory structure on the web server hosting WordPress looks something like this. So when you run the tree command, it basically shows you what directories actually exist in your location and then what is inside of those given directories. And so it shows it in a nice little tree format, as you see right here. So this is representing the current directory that we're in, and then inside of the current directory there's the HTML directory. Inside of that there's the WordPress directory, and inside of that we have the WP admin content and includes pages. And if you do WP admin, or I think there's like WP login, or no, I think it's admin. If you do WP admin, it actually takes you to the login page for the admin, etc. Right? So this is the tree command. It's just like a very, very basic command, and all it's doing is that it's just listing the contents of whatever is available for that directory. So this is what it looks like, right? So when you run the GoBuster dir version, when you run GoBuster in the dir mode, then what it allows you to is to actually scan the website and return these directories to you, as well as the files that exist, and it'll say, you know, this is the path that I found for this specific file. And the status codes will immediately tell you if you, as the outside user, can actually request a directory or not, meaning if it's a status code of 200, that means you can actually open it on your browser, right? If it's a status code of forbidden, I think, which is like 300, or 500, which is a server error, or whatever it is, then that means you can't access those pages. So it's actually very useful because not only does it enumerate for you, but it also tells you whether or not it's accessible by somebody who's on the outside, right? So we of course have the help menu. So if we want a complex overview of this, then we can actually do GoBuster dir help, as we saw in the original help menu, and it'll show us what the various things are that we can actually run. So there are many flags that we can use to fine-tune the dir command, and it's out of the scope of this specific room, but this is essentially the list of it. So if you wanted to configure a cookie to pass along each request, like the session ID, you could actually do that. If you wanted to specify which file extensions you want to scan for, which is .php or .js, you can actually do that. And we have done that in other videos on this channel when we were doing some pen testing exercises, and we just wanted to see what potential file extensions exist or what potential file types existed on the web server. Headers would be the flag that configures the entire header to pass along with each request. No TLS validation skips the process that checks the certificate when HTTPS is used. No status means that you don't want to see the status codes of each response. Password would be that with the username flag, you can actually execute an authenticated request, meaning you would send the username as well as the password to be able to combine that. So the password would be combined with the username flag as well, because you would need to submit the credentials together, obviously. And then we have status codes, so you can configure which status code that you actually want to receive. So for example, you only want to see status code 200, which is a successful page that you can actually access. You could do that. Status code blacklist, so it allows you to configure which status code of the received responses you don't want to display. Username is combined with the password. And then we have follow redirect, which configures the GoBuster to follow the redirect that it received as a response to the sent request. So usually some web pages are no longer available and they say, okay, well, this is redirected to this other location now. It's redirected to another path. So if you do follow redirect, it actually tells GoBuster to follow that redirect and find whatever the new location is for you. So that is also obviously very useful. So if you wanted to use GoBuster in dir mode, you would just do GoBuster dir, as we already saw in the previous example. So this is pretty similar to the last example. And so this is like the full command in this particular case. So you have GoBuster dir, and then U, which is the URL, W, which is the path to the freaking text file, which is a long path, right? So they're using the user share word list, dirbuster, and then directory list 2.3 medium.txt is the actual name of the file. And then you would do -R for it to run it recursively. And I believe, yeah, to follow the redirects, excuse me. So -R would follow the redirects. So this scans all the directories located at the example domain with the word list directory that we just saw. And so this is URL example.com. And so this will find anything for you for the root web directory. So in a typical Apache installation, the var www.html is one of the root locations of the actual web server. So if you have a resources directory and you want to enumerate the directory, you'd set the URL as /resources or / the path to the actual folder itself, which could be the var www.html. Technically, could be the actual path to the domain. But in this particular case, it actually represents the root web directory. So the var www.html / resources would be the full path of that. The URL must contain the protocol that's used. In this case, it's HTTP, so it's important and required. If you pass the wrong protocol, the scan will fail. So in this case, we actually have that in front of it, right? If it's supposed to be HTTPS, you would obviously do that. In the host part of the URL, you can either fill in the IP or the host name. However, it's important to mention that when using the IP, you may target a different website than intended. So instead of doing a domain name, you could actually put an IP address as the site that you want to enumerate. But it could, again, lead to a different website than you intended. So web server can host multiple websites on one IP address. This is also called virtual hosting, so just keep that piece in mind. And use the host name if you want to be sure, which is the option available to actually specify which host name you want to use if you're using an IP address that you're going to scan. GoBuster does not enumerate recursively, so if the results show a directory path that you're interested in, you will have to enumerate that specific directory by changing the URL option right here to whatever this is as the root, and then you would say / resources, and then you would start doing a scanning of the resources folder to see what's inside of that. The W command obviously just gives us the word list. So in this particular case, we're using the medium-sized directory list that's available for dirbuster, and -R configures it to follow the redirect responses. And if the status code is 301, which was received, it will navigate to the redirected URL. So the second example is when we were trying to use file extensions to try to find various file extensions, in this case .php or .javascript, which are the various file types that we are interested in on this particular domain name. So everything pretty much stays exactly the same. We are now just making sure that we want to add these extensions to the end of it so we can see what file types show up. because prior to this previous scan will not show you any kind of file type. This thing isn't going to show you a file type. It's just going to show you various directories that are available. So questions we got is that which flag do we have to add to our command to skip the TLS verification and enter the long flag notation? So we actually have it up here, which is the no TLS validation. This is the long command version. So let me just copy that and I'll just take it to the bottom right here and we'll just paste that over here. And then we have enumerate the directories of offensivetools.thm. Which directory catches your attention? So let's actually run GoBuster here. And the hint says use the 2.3 medium list for enumeration. The directory in question starts with an S. So let's check that out. All right, so here we go. I'm just gonna go to my root domain here and make sure that we just start from the ground up. So what we're doing is the, offensivetools.thm. So it's going to be GoBuster and it's going to be the dir mode and we're going to do -u and we're going to give it HTTP and www.offensivetools.thm. And from here, we're essentially just going to use this long path to the word list, which is, I mean, it is an insanely long path. Let me just be honest here. Directory list 2.3 medium, and then you can always make an error, which is why I really don't, I hate the long paths. And I think that's it, right? So this is the full command and we're running the offensivetools.thm. Let me just make sure I spelled everything correctly because I really don't want to rerun this. I think I'm good. Okay, so I'm just going to press enter and then watch this thing work. And so it says the error on running GoBuster, unable to connect to offensivetools.thm. Get the offensive tools. Oh, you know what? So I think instead of doing that, I was supposed to actually just scan the IP address that was given to me. Oh my gosh. Okay. It looks like I have to retype that whole thing. So, all right, let's try that one more time. There we go. So that actually worked. And now it's enumerating for us. So yeah, I needed to use the IP address that was assigned as our victim machine instead of using the actual domain name, because even though I resolved the domain or the DNS option inside of our configuration file, I did not restart the freaking thing. So that's the one thing that I forgot to do at the very, very beginning. So what I'm going to do is I'm literally just going to actually run that systemctl restart command. So from now on, I can use the domain name instead of having to use the IP address. So it's sudo systemctl restart systemd resolved, and just make sure that that's good. So now I should be able to actually run that previous command that I had with the domain name, which is what you see right here. And so now if I press enter, that should still, no, it still doesn't work. All right, whatever. You know what? It's fine because the other one did work, which is the one with the IP address, and we see it here again. So the location is the secret. So that seems to be the one that's a very interesting little directory. So we have forum, store, example, Joomla, WordPress, server status, and you see the status codes right here as well. And the one that seems to be of note, the one that seems to be interesting to us in this particular case, is going to be the secret directory. So we're going to go over here and then we're just going to say secret. I wonder if, okay, cool. I don't need to do a // So now it says continue enumerating the directory found in this question. You will find an interesting file with a .js extension. What is the flag found in this file? So now we know that we're supposed to look at the -x for extensions. So let's actually go ahead and run that specific command so we can actually find that really interesting file inside of our secret directory. Ooh. Okay, so let me zoom in on this thing right here so that you can see what's going on over here. And let's do that. Oh my God. Okay, here we go. That's better. All right, so we're going to clear this. Hopefully it stays on the screen. That is not how you spell clear. That's how you spell clear. And let's make sure that you could actually see the screen. Okay, cool. So we are going to run the command, the full command for the dir, and it's going to be u again. I'm just going to type this out real quick. All right, so I know that we're supposed to look for a specific JS file. So I'm just literally just going to scan for the JS extension. So I have the content, I have uploads. What else? Let's see what else we can find with this thing right here. All right, there it is. So the first enumeration that I ran was on the secret path, and then it gave me the content and the uploads directory. And then so I tried to enumerate uploads and there was nothing there. And then I did of the content directory, and it gave me .php, and then it gave me the flag.js, which I'm pretty sure is the one that we want. So flag.js is going to be the command. I'm just going to let this finish just to make sure that that is the very last file. I feel like it really is, but I feel like that's that. And then from there, we'll just run a quick little curl command and then see what that flag.js file actually says. And that's it. That's literally it. There's nothing else in it other than this flag. So it says THM recon was a success. All I did was I just ran a curl command on the IP address /secret/content/flag.js. And that is our answer, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. So let me make sure I copy this thing. All right, cool. And then we're going to go over here, and then we're going to go over there, and then we're going to paste it and submit it. And of course, recon was a success. So now we can move on to subdomain enumeration. As we covered in the first exercise that we ran, or like when we were doing the help menu research, subdomain enumeration is done with the DNS mode, and it allows us to brute force subdomains, which is basically what comes before the domain. So for example, drive.google.com, drive in that little domain is the subdomain, right? So during a pen test, checking the subdomains of the target's top domain is essential. Just because something is patched in the regular domain doesn't mean that it's also patched in the subdomain. An opportunity to exploit a vulnerability is in one of those subdomains may exist. So for example, if TryHackMe owns tryhackme.thm and then mobile.tryhackme.thm, there may be a vulnerability in mobile.tryhackme.thm that is not present in the main domain. So that's why it's important to actually go through this. So now here's a couple of help items that are useful for us. So again, we could just do GoBuster DNS -- help to actually get the full help menu. And so these are some of the important items that would be useful for us. So the show CNAME actually shows the CNAME records, which for example would be, if it's www.google.com or google.com, for example, www.google would be one of the CNAMEs, right? So this cannot be used with the I flag, just to keep that in mind. The I flag shows the IP, so this shows the IP addresses that the domain and the subdomains actually resolve to. -R would be the resolver and configures a custom DNS server for the resolving, and then -D would be the actual domain that we want to enumerate. So previously we had -U, now we have -D. So in this particular case, GoBuster DNS-D example.thm, and then we give it this thing, and we would be able to run DNS right here. I really hope this actually works, because for whatever reason, systemctl for me seems to not be able to find the actual domain name for the offensive tools. So I may need to completely reconfigure this whole thing, and hopefully it'll work after that. But this is basically the command. So instead of the dir mode, we're going to use DNS mode -D, and then we're going to give it the actual domain name. We're going to give it the word list, which is in this massive thing, which is a sec list word list that we saw right here. And then from there, hopefully it'll be able to find those subdomains for us. So if we actually run it, this is what it looks like. And then it gives us, example THM, shop example, academy example, primary.example, so on. So apart from the DNS keyword and the W flag, which shorthand flag is required for the command to work? And that would be the -D. And use the commands learned in this task. How many subdomains are configured for offensive tools.thm? So let's see if we can actually find that. Okay, so I troubleshooted this. It actually took me 2 days, and I had to email the support team at TryHackMe for them to fix the room as well as some of the instructions for everything. So the problem was in our initial formatting that was done under the environment and setup portion. So if we refer to the beginning of this video, we weren't modifying the configuration file called resolve DNS mask. We were actually using the one that is I think it was under system D. So this time around, we're actually using the initd. So it was systemctl, and then we were resolving the specific file that was the configuration file for system D, and then we had to restart that, so on and so forth. So the instructions have been completely modified for this particular room as it stands as I record this. So this is today is, what is it, February 5th. So Wednesday, February 5th of 2025, the instructions have been adjusted to these set of instructions. So what you will see over here is that instead of modifying the initial file that we had, we are now modifying the resolve-DNS mask file, which is inside of the etc folder. So it's still inside of the configuration for etc folder. So we will be going sudo nano etc resolve DNS mask. And once you do that, this is what the file actually looks like. So let me just kind of show you the actual file itself. So this is what the file will look like, assuming that this actually works. So this is it, right? So at the very, very top of this, initially when I opened this file, this was the line, that was the first line. And I just pressed enter, and then I entered this line as our first line. So we actually have name server, and then this is the IP address that has been assigned to me for today's exercise as I rebooted all of the virtual machines and the attack boxes. So when you make that modification and then you save the file, then once you do the cat, so when you concatenate, just so you can see the contents of the DNS mask file, you'll see that the name server for the actual IP address that we have over here has been added to the top of our name server file. So that's the first thing that you got to do, is you need to modify, you need to edit this specific file, and then add the name server and then the IP address at the very top, and then you save the file, and then you need to restart that service. So you would still do etc init.d /DNS mask. So etc /init.d /DNS mask with a Q at the end of it, and then you restart it, and then it restarts the DNS mask service. And then once you do that, you can actually run GoBuster in DNS mode, which is the most recent exercise that we had over here. So to actually run it in DNS mode and see how many subdomains are configured for offensivetools.thm. And so this was the official command that I ran to establish that, which was GoBuster in DNS mode. So no different than what we had earlier in the instructions. And then we see GoBuster DNS-D, and then the actual domain name with this massive path to the word list. And then we got these results. So we have offensive tools, and then we have these subdomains right here, which is forum, store, primary, and there's two that shows up, which is offensivetools.thm. So I wonder if it seems to be 3. So I think the answer is 3 different domains. So let's see if it's 3 or if it's 4. Although I want to say that the way that they have it outlined, I think it's 4. So yeah, it is 4. So they found the main one, which is this piece right here, then forum, store, and then we have this www offensive tools, which technically shows up under the subdomains that we see right here. So I think this is just listed as another. Oh, you know what it is? It's the www right here is lowercase, and then we have www uppercase. So I believe that counts as one of the subdomains that are listed for offensive tools. But the exercise actually completed. The command was able to run, which was the big thing that I was really trying to get done, because it was not working. I tried for a very long time last night. I restarted the machines, I reconfigured the file multiple times, and finally I was like, you know what, I just stopped the recording, and then I emailed them immediately, and I was like, I think there's something going on. I gave them all of the attempts that I had made. I even modified the etc host file to include the host and the IP address. Like, I did so many different troubleshooting activities, and none of them worked. So it got to the point that I was like, okay, I feel like there's something wrong with the room. And then I emailed them and they immediately responded to me, or at least they responded today. So it took them a little bit, maybe like 12 hours or something like that. And then they worked on it. And when I logged into it today, we see that the adjustments for the instructions have actually been made, which is very different from the instructions that we got at the beginning of this video. So you can actually compare it to the instructions at the beginning of the video. And then, so this is the most current set of instructions. If you're having the same issues that I had when I was running the command, this is the reason why. So you can restart your machines and then go ahead and modify the DNS mask file, add the name server with the IP address at the very, very top, at the very first line, and then restart the DNS mask service, and you should be good to go. So now we can finally move on to vhost enumeration. The vhost mode allows us to brute force virtual host enumeration, and virtual hosts are different websites on the same machine. So sometimes they look like subdomains, but sometimes they're also IP based and they're running on the same server. So subdomains are set up in DNS, and the difference between vhost and DNS is the way that GoBuster actually scans. So vhost will be able to navigate to the URL that's been created by combining the configured host name, which is under the U flag, and then with an entry of a word list, where DNS will do a DNS lookup to the fully qualified domain name that's been created by combining the configured domain name, which is using the D flag with an entry of a word list. So you can always look at the help menu for vhost by just doing GoBuster vhost -- help, and then you'll see things like this. So for example, the flag that you would need would be the URL flag, similar to what we did with the initial mode for the dir mode, the dir mode, where this brute forces virtual host names. You can append the domain, which appends the base domain to each word in the word list, for example, word.example.com, and append means it just adds it to the list. And then we have -m, which is for the method. So if you want to use a specific HTTP method to use for the request, so let's say a get method or a post method, the domain would be --domain. I don't think there's a shortcut for this, or maybe it just doesn't show it right here. But appends a domain, it appends a domain to each word list entry to form a valid host name, and it's useful if it's not provided explicitly. Exclude the length, excludes the results based on the length of the response body, and then follow redirect is very similar to what we had previously as well, where it just follows all of the redirects to try to find them for us. So the way to run this would be vhost, and then you would use -u, provide the URL here, and then the word list. So in this particular case, vhost-u can actually be used with an IP address that we actually have over here. The domain in this particular case would be example.thm, and then we give it the word list as well, and it actually goes and finds various vhosts, virtual hosts for us. This command is much more complex than the base command syntax that we've had before, because it contains many more flags that we had, for example, the domain and the append domain. So if we actually go over here, I think I skipped through it, but I think there might be an append domain. Yeah, there's an append domain at the end right here. Exclude length, as well as the length configurations as well. So there's several extra additions to it. And so let's see, it contains many more configured flags. It'll often be the case in realistic tests, depending on how the infrastructure of the domain to test has been set up. In our case, we don't have a fully set up DNS infrastructure, and this requires us to give in the extra flags like domain and append domain. And we need to look at the web requests that GoBuster sends to understand better how these flags work. So below you can see the basic GET request that has been sent. So it's a GET request, and it's going to the /, which is essentially the root domain, and then it's just a HTTP 1.1 version. The host is example.com or example.thm, and then it's example.thm, and this right here would be / meaning the root. So if this was / login, then it would go to example.thm / login, right? The user agent is GoBuster in this particular case, which is the software that's actually making this request, and it's accepting these various types of formatting. And then we have the language acceptance, encoding acceptance, and to keep that connection alive. So if we break this down, GoBuster will send multiple requests, and each time changing the host part of the request, and the value of that in this example is the www.example.thm, and we can break this down into the www, which is the subdomain in this case, and this is the part that the GoBuster will fill in with each entry. Example or .example is the second level domain, and you can configure this with the -- domain flag, and this needs to be configured together with the top level domain, which is .thm, and you can configure this with the domain flag as well, and this needs to be configured with the second level domain. So you need to include these two together. You would do -- domain, and then you would do .example.thm or .google.com or whatever. So now that we know that this actually sends its requests, or how it sends its requests, we can break down the command itself. So GoBuster vhost goes into virtual host mode, enumerating virtual host. -u sets the URL to browse that IP address right here. -w is our actual word list, which is pretty much the same thing. There's a note here where it says it appends each entry in the word list to the configured domain. If no domain is explicitly configured with that flag, then GoBuster will extract it from the URL, for example, test.example.thm, help, whatever. If any subdomains are found, GoBuster will report them to you in the terminal. So if we don't configure this, if we don't actually use this, it'll typically just kind of narrow down, it'll extract it from the URL. So hopefully it'll still work the same way, although if it's trying to get virtual host from an IP address, it might, because as we discovered earlier in the room, they might be hosting multiple websites on the same IP address. And then we have the -- domain, which actually sets the top and second level domains in the hostname part of the request, and then the append domain, which appends the configured domain to each entry in the word list. If this flag is not configured, that the set hostname would be www.blog, whatever, this will cause the command to work incorrectly and display false positives. So that's very, very important. And then we have the exclude length filter, which filters the responses we get from the sent web request. With this flag, we can filter out all of the false positives. If you run the command without this flag, you will notice that you'll get a lot of false positives like found, These false positives typically have a similar response size, so we can actually use this. You know what's interesting? I was using GoBuster for a pen test exercise that was a part of a job application, and I did not know about these various flags or options that I could have included, and I actually was getting a lot of false positives, and I was like, it's impossible that all of these subdomains exist, and now I understand why. So it's interesting. As you continue your education, you learn about a lot of these things that it's like, oh, I wish I would have known that earlier, and if I did, then I would have probably passed that pen test with better results. And moving on to our question. So use the commands learned in this task to answer the following question. How many vhosts on the offensive tools domain reply with a status code of 200? So we look at the hint. It says copy the example command and edit the flags accordingly. All right. So essentially what we're going to do, and again, I'll just open this up in a new window just to make our life a little bit easier here. And then from there, we'll be able to run these commands. All right, so let us start with a fresh terminal, and I'm just going to type this thing out because it's a pretty long command, and then we will just review it as necessary. Okay, so this is the full command. It's a pretty hefty command. We have GoBuster vhost -u, and then we give it the IP address with the HTTP in front of it, and then we do -- domain, and then offensivetools.thm is the domain, and then we have -w, and then we give it the full word list, which is an insane length, and then we have -- append -domain, and then -- exclude -length, and then 252.320, and that is to help us avoid false positives. So here we go, fingers crossed, pressing enter. Very, very quick response. That's amazing. And so what do we got? We got forum, offensive tools, store, secret, offensive tools, secret.offensive tools, huh? Offensive tools with www, and then with a capital WW in the front as well. And then they all came back with status codes of 200. So we have 5 responses that give us a status code of 200. So let's see if that is indeed the right answer. And it's not. That's so weird. So I literally have 5. So why? So why would that not be the response? Should I remove one of them? So is it 4? I guess it is 4. So because looking at the main one, which is the lowercase w's, I guess that's not the right answer. But technically, there are 5 that we got as a response. So technically, it's 5. But I guess if we just remove this main one right here, which is our original www, then we'll have forum, store, secret, and then the capital www. And that's it. I really want to see what's at secret.offensive tools. Like, there's no other exercise that they're telling us to go to, which is kind of obnoxious and it's really annoying. And I really want to see what's over there. But I will not prolong this exercise anymore compared to what we have right now, because I do want to make sure I don't go down too many rabbit holes, because I tend to do that. So we're officially wrapped for this video. All right, so we learned about GoBuster in DNS mode, in dir mode, and in vhost mode, and that respectively, DNS mode actually enumerates DNS subdomains, dir mode enumerates directories, and vhost enumerates virtual hosts. And for each mode, we covered the required flags to actually make it run, to configure them, and additional optional flags that were available. And we've highlighted the difference between the DNS mode and the vhost mode. And DNS uses the DNS service to scan for the subdomains using configured domain and word list. vhost sends the web requests using a configured URL and word list. So at the end of each task, we also applied all of these things. So far, I mean, you should have a pretty good understanding, even if you've never used it before. And even for me, for somebody who has actually used it before, I even learned something that I did not know. So it was actually very, very cool exercise, a cool room. And hopefully, because I did record this across 2 different days, because the first day, the initial instructions that we had for configuring our resolve D for the DNS resolution to actually be able to make the DNS version work, those instructions did not work. So I had to reach out and get the instructions directly from TryHackMe. So hopefully you were able to apply the new set of instructions that we got and able to make the DNS version work for you, and the debugging and everything that was required from that. So that is what we had for our GoBuster room. If you found this video useful, I do encourage you to like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out, especially as we progress into the Cybersecurity 101 series, the CySec101 playlist. And of course, there's new content that's coming out regularly. For example, Network Plus is actually coming out. And then there's going to be the entire series that's coming out for the AI integration with cybersecurity tools, which I'm super, super excited about, because the future of everything in IT and technology is AI related, and robots and all of that stuff. So it's very, very important for us to understand that and to be able to work with that as security professionals, as people in IT. So all of that stuff is coming in the near future, and to get notified of that, make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so that you actually get a notification when new videos come out. And then of course, drop any comments if you have any questions about what we went through. Hopefully the instructions from today's videos will actually help you so that you can go through whatever debugging necessary, because I feel like, I mean, hopefully by the time that you're watching this video, you don't have to worry about that part of it. And then just comparing the end of today's video with the earlier portion of today's video, you'll see the difference in the instructions that we had to prep for the rest of the room to be able to run DNS mode, etc. So hopefully all of that worked out. But if it doesn't, if you have any questions, just drop it in the comment section and I will respond accordingly. And essentially that's it. So drop your comments, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, say hi, say thanks, whatever you want. And yeah. And you can also say thanks by supporting this channel and joining Hackaholics Anonymous, the premier community for security professionals and hackers. We have 4 tiers: the supporter, agent, guardian, and master. Each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The agent, guardian, and master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every single month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below, or you can go to our homepage and click the join button, or you can go to youtube.com/@hankhackshackers/join, and you'll be able to join Hackaholics Anonymous. I hope I see you in our Discord servers. If not, I hope I see you in the comment section, and that's it. This is your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite network and system attacker / protector. Love, peace, and chicken grease. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you, and I will see you in the next video later. In episode 37 of the CySec101 training series, we're going to go through the overview of shells, and this is very different from the previous command line tutorials that we had. We're actually going to be talking about how to create shells to connect to remote hosts, or how to create reverse shells, what all of that even means, and how this all plays out when it comes down to offensive security, because again, we are under the offensive security tooling section of the Cybersecurity 101 pathway of TryHackMe, and you're going to learn a lot about this. This is a very, very important section. This is going to prepare us for everything that we're going to do inside of Junior Pentester and Pentest Plus, and this is going to be a little bit more technical than everything else that we've talked about so far, but you're just going to learn a lot. This specific video is going to be very, very important. It's going to be very powerful in your education, because if you are interested in ethical hacking and pen testing, just understanding what these various shell types are and how to create these shells so that you can have a connection to a remote host, so that you can manipulate the remote host and do whatever it is that you want. All of this is just super, super important. So we're going to go over through obviously the intro to this, the overview of shells, the various shell types. So we have the reverse shell, the bind shell, shell listeners, payloads for shells, the web shell, and of course a practical exercise where we're going to be tested, so we can actually get some capture the flag exercises going and everything else. So I'm actually really excited about this for you. This is going to be a great review for me, as well as a great introduction for anyone who's never seen what a reverse shell looks like and how we can do this when it comes down to penetration testing. So if you'd like to support this channel, consider joining Hackaholics Anonymous, the premier community for security professionals and hackers. We have 4 tiers: the supporter, agent, guardian, and master. Each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The agent, guardian, and master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every single month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below, or you can go to our homepage and click the join button there, or you can go to youtube.com/@HankHacksHackers/join, and you'll be able to join Hackaholics Anonymous. Now, without further ado, let us jump into the shells overview room. Shells are typically used in cybersecurity to remotely control systems, and this is specifically for offensive security, or malicious hacking, black hat hacking. And so making them an important part of the attack chain, which is the Lockheed Martin attack chain, or really any kind of penetration testing offensive security attack chain. So we're going to explore these different shells that we use in OffSec, the differences between them, and what their actual specific use cases are. And it can enhance your penetration testing and exploitation skills, because it's very crucial for that stuff. And it helps us understand how to detect these things when somebody's attacking our network and our systems. So it's very important to think like a hacker when you're going into cybersecurity. Even if you're just going to be on the defensive security side and you're not going to be a penetration tester, if you know how to think like a hacker, then you're going to be able to catch hackers more effectively. So what we're going to talk about is the different types of shells in cybersecurity and offensive security. We're going to set up and use these various types of shells, so the reverse shell or a bind shell, and then we're going to deploy web shells, and of course we have the practical exercise for capturing the flag and all of that good stuff. The prerequisites of this video are just a basic understanding of networking. So if you don't know basic networking, I would recommend you go watch some of the videos on the channel about networking, fundamental knowledge of web application security, the command line proficiency, and understanding Bash and Python, which are important languages. So all of these things are available on this channel. You can actually go ahead and find a variety of videos on every single one of these topics. For example, the command line, we did several videos in the Cybersecurity 101. In the CySec 101 training series, we've done the Windows command line, Windows PowerShell, Linux shell. We've done all of these things, and there's multiple compilation videos as well about shells. There's the web application security stuff that is also a part of the CySec 101 training series that talks about the basics of web applications, JavaScript, SQL, Burp Suite, all of that, which was actually, I think, the section right before this section that we're on for offensive security. So all of this stuff is inside of the CySec101 playlist, the playlist that you're actually watching right now. All of these contents are here. Now, the Python and Bash videos are not inside of this specific playlist, but there are multiple videos on this channel. For example, Python for cybersecurity, really strong video. It teaches you the absolute basics of Python, and then it carries you all the way to the end of the series where you actually learn how to build algorithms using Python. And Python is my favorite language because it's so user-friendly and it's very powerful, very functional. And then there's, Linux Plus, and then the SysAdmin video and all of that for Linux that actually teaches you how to use Bash and how to create Bash scripts, specifically in the Linux Plus training series and in the Linux Plus playlist. If you actually go look at the last video of that playlist, you're going to just go through various exercises with me as we create Bash scripts. And it's all very powerful and very useful. PHP, unfortunately, I don't have any training videos on PHP, but I think we should be solid. We should be pretty good because I will explain as we go along what these various elements of the PHP scripts are that we will actually end up using. So for the most part, I think you will be very solid for PHP specifically, just using the video that you're watching right now. But if you're interested in everything else, I would just recommend going and watching those videos. Now, there is a caveat here. The use of Metasploit or other frameworks that generate or interact with shells has been intentionally left behind from this room. And this is to focus on understanding how shells work without the use or assistance of a tool that is set up to generate a shell. So Metasploit is a very powerful tool. We actually have a couple of videos on Metasploit in the CySec101 playlist. So it's a very powerful tool. We've actually used it before, but for this room, we're not going to use Metasploit to create shells or payloads. We're also going to be using the Linux OS for all the examples. So we're not going to be using Windows, which is still possible for you to pretty much run kind of the same commands that we're running for creating web shells through Windows. But if you're going to be a hacker, if you're going to go into offensive security, Kali Linux is the operating system for offensive security and penetration testing and hacking. So you got to learn how to use Linux. And again, there's just so many videos on this channel for Linux because this channel is all about cybersecurity and hacking. So I would say that Windows is more solid for defensive security, but for offensive security, Linux is where it's at. So if you don't know Linux, you're about to learn. If you ain't know, you better ask somebody. So I've already started the virtual machine. I've already started the attack box. We're ready to go, and let's get started. The first thing we need to understand is what a shell even is. So a shell is a software that allows the user to interact with an operating system. It could have a GUI, a graphical interface, but it's usually command line based. And this will depend on the operating system that's running on the target system. And in CySec, it's commonly referred to a specific shell session an attacker uses when accessing a compromised system and allowing them to run commands and execute software. So this will allow the attacker, the hacker, to execute a remote system control, for example. So allowing them to execute commands or software remotely in the target system, escalate privileges, which if their initial access was not really high, or if they have limited access, they can actually escalate their privileges to get administrator privileges, for example, to have root privileges to be able to do some really crazy things that requires high permission. You can exfiltrate data. So once you actually have access to the remote system, you can start stealing data. Persistence and maintenance access. So if you have persistence on a system, that means you don't have to keep hacking into the system. You just stay logged into the system. And this is what a shell allows you to do, because usually if they catch the first attempt that you made, they may block your access to gain a new shell. So if you actually have persistence, that means you don't need to re-hack into the system because you're already pretty much in the system. So it's a really big deal to actually be able to achieve persistence. Post-exploitation activities, so you can essentially deploy malware if you wanted to. You can create hidden accounts. You can delete information. You can install ransomware. You can do a lot of things, which is post-exploitation. It just depends on what your goal is to hack into a machine or a company, and then access other systems on the network. So depending on your intentions, you can actually be using your initial shell, the first shell that you got, as your first access point, and then you can hop through the network to different targets using the obtained shell as a pivot to different points. So there was a Security Plus training that I put on this channel that we were talking about all these different case studies of what happened to these big companies when they got hacked. And one of the most common stories, like one of the most powerful stories, was when Target got hacked. And they got hacked because somebody got access to a vendor that they were using. So they were able to hack the vendor that they were using, and then they used the vendor's login to actually get into Target's system. And then once they were into Target's system, they went into their payment card, their POS system, their payment something where they were like collecting payment information basically. And once they got point of sale, there you go. So point of sale system. Once they got into their point of sale system, they were able to steal a bunch of credit card information and their customer information. And it was a very, very, very big deal. And Target lost a lot of money, and they lost, I mean, it was a big deal. So this is what happens when you gain an initial foothold, an initial shell, and then you pivot and you go into a different system. So you went from the vendor, the third-party vendor, into Target, and then once you were in Target, you pivoted again, and then you went into their point of sale system, and you were able to steal credit card information and all of their customer information. So it just depends on what the goal is of the hacker, right? So what I just described is a really big felony, so please don't do that. Like, don't do penetration testing without permission of a company. You can use bug bounties and things like that to be able to get yourself paid to actually pen test. That's something that we do with Hackaholics Anonymous, which is something that I've mentioned multiple times, and I mention it at the beginning of every video and at the end of every video, where we actually have these like chats that we have on Discord, and we have monthly live streams where we talk about bug bounties and how to actually make money by hacking legally. And all of that stuff is something that, I mean, if you're interested in it, I really encourage you to click the link in the description below to actually check out the Hackaholics Anonymous community and join us in those Discord chats, because if you are interested in making money from hacking, there are legal ways to do it. So anyways, so what is the command line interface that allows users to interact with an operating system? And that, my friend, is called a shell. So what is the process that involves using a compromised system as a launching pad to attack other machines in the network? And I think we call that pivoting, right? So you use a compromised shell. So let's see what that actually is. Depending on the attacker, the object can be an initial access point. The goal can be hop through the network on different targets and use a pivot to different points in the compromised system. This is also known as pivoting, correct? So that is indeed the answer. And then what is a common activity attackers perform after obtaining shell access to escalate their privileges? And we call that privilege escalation. All right, so now let's talk about the first shell type, which is the reverse shell. The reverse shell, sometimes referred to as the connect back shell, is one of the most popular techniques that we'll use in pen testing and ethical hacking. And this is to gain access to a system in a cyber attack. And essentially, it initiates a connection from the target system to the attacker's machine. So instead of us getting a shell to the target, we get a reverse shell. So we get it from the target to our machine. And this can usually help avoid detection from the network firewalls and other security appliances, because again, the target is connecting to us. So the way that this works is that first we need to set up a listener on our machine. And the most common way to do this is through netcat. So the command line reference to this is NC. So it's really simple. So first we need to understand how this actually works in a practical scenario. So this is what allows us to do it. And this works on pretty much every single OS, and it allows the reading and writing through a network. So a reverse shell will connect back to the attacker machine. This will be waiting. The attacker machine actually needs to be waiting for that connection. So we would use netcat to do this. And you just do nc-lvnp, and then you want to do it, let's say, on port 443. Now, in this case, it's saying listening on any, and which ends up being port 4444. And 443 is the port that is the HTTPS port. So the command itself uses the L option, which means that netcat is going to listen or wait for a connection. The V option is verbose mode, so that we can actually just get everything printed on our terminal as it happens. The N option prevents the connection from using DNS for lookup, so it's not going to resolve any host name to the actual IP address. It's just going to be using an IP address, which is very important for this process. So we just want to connect via IP address instead of trying to connect via a domain name, right? And then the P flag indicates the port that we want to listen to. In this case, is port 443. Now, any port can be used to wait for a connection, but attackers and pen testers tend to use known ports that are used by other applications like 50, 83, 80, 80, 443, whatever. This is to blend the reverse shell with legitimate traffic and avoid detection by a security appliance, which is very important. Now, if you use something like 4444 or 7777, these things are actually programmed inside of an intrusion detection system, or anybody that has done hacking before, where they're like, oh, you know what? This is like one of those ports that is commonly used by a listener. Metasploit, for example, all of the Metasploit exercises that we've previously ran before, we usually use something like this. And it's like, okay, well, all you need to do is go through the logs and search through the logs for port 4444, and it's like you can rest assured like 99% of the time that if they're using this port, that means they're using some kind of a payload or a reverse shell, and then you can just block that IP address, right? So getting reverse shell access is after the initial connection established or the initial listening has been done through Netcat. And then you can just use a variety of different tools to create that. So once we have the listener that's set, we would then execute what's known as a reverse shell payload. And this usually abuses the vulnerability or unauthorized access that's granted by the attacker and executes a command that will expose the shell through the network. There's a variety of payloads that will depend on the tools and the operating system of the compromised system. And we can explore some of them here. So what page is this here? Pentest Monkey, I see. So Pentest Monkey has a bunch of different reverse shell cheat sheets. This is actually a super useful page right here. So for Bash, this is what you can use for Perl, for Python, for PHP, for Ruby, Netcat, Java, all of these different locations. So these are a bunch of different pen testing tools, specifically reverse shells that you can use. So that's pretty awesome that that's available. One of the examples that we have is a pipe reverse shell that you can see right here. So there's a series of commands that are being piped into each other. So if you see this right here, that's a pipe. And what that means is that the output of this full command is being piped into this command, and then the output of this is being piped into this command, which is netcat, and that is then just being that's like the final portion of this. So we have technically three different sets of commands, and the output of this one is being piped into this, and the output of this is being piped into this to be able to establish that. So just kind of going through the various breakdowns of this, the first portion right here separated by the semicolon, this removes any existing named pipe that's located at the temp location of this folder. So this ensures that the script can actually create a new named pipe without conflicts. And then we will create it. So the MKFIFO, so MKFIFO, this creates a named pipe or a FIFO, first in, first out, on the temp F directory. And the named pipes allow for two-way communication between processes. In this context, it acts as a conduit for input output. So literally imagine a pipe, right? And so the pipe of your sink or whatever, the pipe has some kind of an input. It comes from one location, and then the output goes out of the other location. Same thing, same concept over here. This is not referring to this pipe that we see right here. It's literally referring to creating a pipe so that you can actually establish a shell from one location to another location. And then we have the cat command, which essentially just reads the data. Cat stands for concatenate, and it just reads the data from the named pipe that's been created, and then it'll wait for an input that can be sent through that pipe. So first we remove any existing pipes, then we create a pipe, and then we just read the data of this specific file so that we know what's going on and which pipe is waiting for the input, right? So once this is done, we then take this last command right here, that's reading the contents of that to actually find that pipe for us. We're going to then take the output of that and then pipe it into this command. So now we're talking about just this concept of piping, which then is going to, the output of the cat is going to go into a shell instance, which is the bash interface, right? Which allows the attacker to execute commands interactively, excuse me, not interface, interactively. So that bash I goes into the interactive mode of bash to create a shell for us. And then the two, I guess, I always call this the greater than symbol, but 2 greater than ampersand 1, this piece right here, redirects the standard error to standard output, ensuring that error messages are sent back to the attacker. So usually 2 and then going into whatever, the 2 references some kind of an error message, and you can then redirect that to any location that you want. You can delete it, whatever. In this particular case, we're taking the error messages and we're resending it back to us, the actual attacker. And then the output of this is going to be input into our netcat. So this part pipes the shell's output, which is this shell right here, and it's going to pipe it through netcat to the attacker's IP address, which is the first portion of this, on the attacker's port, which is this portion of this, and then we're going to take the final part that sends the output of all of those commands back into the named pipe, which allows for bi-directional communication, so going back and forth. So this is, again, if you remember, all of this is this is the initial location where we created a pipe. So you're taking everything that you did right here, this whole thing is now going to be put into our named pipe that we created so that we can have this back and forth communication from that pipe that we initially established at the very beginning of this. So the payload above can expose the shell, the bash shell, through the network to the desired listener, which is our netcat listener that we have over here. So once the above payload is executed, the attacker will receive a reverse shell, and this is what that looks like. So when you have your netcat listener going, it says it's listening, and then it says connecting to whatever from unknown whatever to run a command as admin, user root, use sudo, because this specific machine is, I guess, a Linux machine. And then you see that the command line itself has actually changed, which is the attacker at Kali, and now we have the target at TryHackMe. And once you see the command line change, that means you actually have your established connection. Your reverse shell is complete, and now whatever you run after this is as if you're running it from this machine's command line directly, but you're obviously connected remotely, right? So it's very, very cool strategy, and this is essentially what we just talked about right now is the full detailed breakdown of you becoming a hacker, right? So if you achieve this, if you actually are able to do this, then you are officially, you've done like your first really good hacking exercise. So all right, so what type of shell allows an attacker to execute commands remotely after the target connects back? This is our, I think, what is we, remote shell, right? That's what we're talking about here. Or reverse shell, sorry, reverse shell. And then what tool is commonly used to set up a listener for a reverse shell? And that is netcat. And that's pretty much it. All right, so cool. I think we're gonna use all of these trainings that we just went through for the practical exercise at the very end for the capture the flag stuff that we end up doing. So reverse shell was the first type of shell that we just created. So now let's talk about the bind shell. A bind shell will bind a port on the compromised system and listen for a connection. When this occurs, it exposes the shell session so that the attacker can execute commands remotely. And this can be used when the compromised target does not allow outgoing connections, but it tends to be less popular because it needs to remain active and listen for connections, which can then, of course, lead to detection. So the reverse shell comes from the target to us. The bind shell will bind a port on that compromised system, and then it listens for a connection, right? So the compromised system is listening for a connection. So first, setting up the bind shell on the actual target. So again, we'll kind of similar from what we did before. First, we remove any existing named pipes that are located in that location. then we create a pipe or a first in, first out pipe on that specific location, and then we concatenate the contents of that. So the first portion of this is exactly the same. And then this next port is also exactly the same, where we go, we create a bash instance using the bash-i, and then we will take all of the error messages and redirect them, ensuring that messages are actually sent to us as the attacker. And then this is the part where it changes a little bit. So we have netcat-l, and then we have this on the listening on the IP address on port 8080. So this listens and this creates a netcat listener on all of our interfaces, which is done using this specific IP address format. So instead of just using whatever the IP address is for your machine, you literally do it on every single instance or on every single interface by just using 0000. And then the port 8080, and this will be exposed to the attacker once they connect to this port. And then all of this again goes back to the pipe that we created at the very, very beginning. So this is something that we do on the target machine, right? So the attacker can use a command like this on the target machine. So this is being done on the target, the one that we did previously where we were using the reverse shell right here. This piece right here, we're actually doing this on our machine, right? So this is the piece that's very important to kind of establish. And I just want to make sure that we actually are doing this on our machine, because an example payload as shown below, and I feel like this is actually what we're doing on our machine, or we may also be doing it on the target machine as well. But I feel like we're doing it on our machine. No, I think this is also being done on the target machine. So this is also being done on the target machine. I will stand corrected once we actually go through the practical exercises, and I may not be right with that, but this one has clearly declared that we're going to be running this on the target machine. And then from there, we would go ahead and terminal on the target machine. Yeah, so this is what we're doing on the target, as it says right here. And then the attacker will then connect to that by actually using netcat to then connect to that listener that is on the target. So then we would launch netcat on the attacker machine, but instead of going through the DNS mode, we're actually doing it to create a connection to the listening device on, or to the listening port on the target. So N specifically, again, disables DNS resolution, which allows us to avoid unnecessary lookups and things like that. And V is still for verbose mode. Then we give it the target IP address of the target machine, as well as the port number on the target that's actually listening. And then once we run that, we will be able to get the connection as long as this payload on the target is actually run properly. Once we do that, then we'll be able to go ahead and connect to it from our machine using netcat. And of course, it's not in listening mode because it's, again, just trying to connect via whatever port is available on the IP address, on the given IP address. So this is how we create a binding shell. And the binding shell in this particular case starts with us creating that payload on the target, and then we come back to our machine, and then we establish the netcat connection from our machine. So what type of shell opens a specific port on the target machine? So the answer for this is obviously bind shell. And listening below which port number requires root access on privileged permissions. So listening below which port number, what? It's kind of a weird question. So, I mean, I literally just Googled the question, and it says listening on a port number below 1024 typically requires root access or privileged permissions, as they are considered privileged ports and are reserved for system services that need elevated privileges to function. So I'm just going to say 1024, and let's see if that's, oh, that is right. Okay. So I've never even heard a question like that, but that's good to know again. So I'm learning things as we're going along with this training series. So, okay. Now we can talk about shell listeners. As we've established so far, a reverse shell will connect from the compromised target to the attacker's machine. A utility like netcat will handle the connection and allow the attacker to interact with the exposed shell, but netcat is not the only utility that will allow us to do that. So it's not the only listener or I mean, it has listening mode as well as the kind of connection mode. So it's not the only one. I think it's the most popular one or the most commonly referred one, but it's not the only one. So we have another one called RLWrap, and it's a small utility that uses the GNU readline library to provide editing, keyboard, and history. So the usage example, enhancing a netcat shell with RLWrap. So you would just use RLWrap at the beginning, and then you would continue with your netcat listener command. So this wraps netcat with the RLWrap that allows the use of features like arrow keys and history for better interaction. And then we have NCAT, which is the improved version of netcat that's distributed by the Nmap project, and it provides extra features like encryption, which is SSL. So you could just do, again, NCAT, very similar to the netcat command, except now you're just using NCAT. And usage example would be listening for reverse shells with SSL. So you would do NCAT, and then you just give it the --SSL to connect with an encryption, and this enables the SSL encryption for your listener. Then you have SOCAT that allows you to create a socket connection between two data sources, in this case, two different hosts. So the example for this would be SOCAT and a -D-D, which enables the verbose output, and then using it again will increase the verbosity. You could also do -DD, and then you would do TCP listen 443, which it creates a TCP listener on port 443 and establishes a server socket for incoming connections. And finally, the STD out option directs any of the incoming data to your actual standard out to your actual terminal. So it displays everything on your terminal. So -D is just giving you double verbosity, and you could just do -DD and it'll still accomplish the same thing. And then TCP-listen in caps, obviously, and then you are listening on port 443, and then STD out just puts everything on your terminal as it happens. So that's basically it. These are the different listeners that we have, these shell listeners that we have. So which flexible tool allows us to create a socket connection, which is going to be SOCAT, which command line utility provides a read line style, which is editing and command history for programs, so that will be RLWrap. And then what is the improved version of netcat that is distributed, and that would be NCAT. So that's what we got, and it offers additional features like SSL support. So, and then RLWrap just wraps it so that you can actually use the up and down arrow keys, things like that. And then of course we have SOCAT that allows us to listen on a socket. So now let's talk about the payloads, the shell payloads. A shell payload can be a command or script that exposes the shell to an incoming connection in the case of a bind shell, or a send connection in the case of a reverse shell. So it's basically either a command or a script that exposes the shell to an incoming connection, or a send connection. An incoming connection is coming from the bind, as we established, or a send connection comes in the case of a reverse shell. So we can look at these various payloads, and they're going to be used inside of the Linux operating system, as we already established. So the bash version of this, so we would do bash, and so the reverse shell initiates an interactive bash shell that redirects the input and output through a TCP connection to the attacker's IP address on port 443. So we have bash, and we've established an interactive session, and we are going to essentially use the dev TCP attacker IP 443. This is where it's going to create our shell, and the dev partition is for our devices, right? So we can, for, let's say, your mouse or for your keyboard and things like that. And so inside of our devices partition, we create this little TCP location that actually creates this payload. So essentially this is going to be a file, right? That's what the payload is. So it is, as we said, it is a command or a script that exposes it. So it creates that for us, and then the AND operator, or this piece right here that you see right here, combines both the standard output and standard error inside of it, and now it's creating this thing for us to be available on port 443. So bash read line reverse shell is another version of this. So we have the normal reverse shell that we just created right here. This is the read line reverse shell. So we do the execute command, and then this whole piece right here, and the 5 in this case is going to, it's the new file descriptor, so which is 5, and then it's going to do the same thing in our dev partition, and then we are going to concatenate that specific file, and then pipe the output of this whole piece, this whole section right there, and then it's going to go into this piece where it says while it's reading the line, do the line with that element. So we literally have a little bit of a while loop that we have over here. So it says while read line is true, essentially, then you want to create a variable for that line, and then we're going to feed that into the errors are going to go into the new file descriptor that we have, which is the file 5 basically, and then after that it's going to be finished. So this is the whole command right here. So we have a while loop, and then at the end of every while loop you just need to have done to just make sure that it finishes the loop and it doesn't break the script. And each one of these semicolons is essentially saying that there's a new line. So this will be the first line of the script, this will be the next line of the script, and then this would be the third line of the script, and this would be the full script. And then so now what we have here is that there's a new file descriptor, 5 in this particular case, and it connects to the TCP socket, which is what we have over here, and it will read and execute the commands from the socket, sending the output back through the same socket. That's what this whole thing does. So read line reverse shell. And then bash with the file descriptor 196 reverse shell. So it uses the file descriptor 196 to establish a TCP connection, and it allows the shell to read commands from the network and send the output back through the same connection. So let's see, it's fairly similar to what we had previously, at least at the very beginning right here. The only thing that's changed is that we don't have this execute at the top. We have 0, and then it's going into 196, and then we are executing this right here. So then we have the sh for the shell, and then it's going back and forth from the 196, and then all the error messages are then going also to the file descriptor of 196. And then with the file descriptor 5 reverse shell, so we have bash in the interactive mode with the file descriptor of 5, and again, same piece right here that's on the dev partition, and then all of that is going to be back and forth into that file descriptor of 5. So the 0, the 1, and the 2 messages are all going into the descriptor of 5. So the command opens a shell, but it uses the file descriptor 5 for input and output, enabling an interactive session over the TCP connection. And now we have the the PHP. Now we have the PHP shells. So we have a PHP reverse shell using the execute function. So then you would essentially, it creates a socket connection to the attacker's IP on port 443, and then uses the execute function to execute the shell, redirecting standard input and output. And so this is what this piece looks like right here. And I am not that great at explaining PHP scripting, so this is a little bit out of my depth, but we are using the PHP-R to actually create this reverse shell that's going right here, and everything inside of the quotes is essentially the script itself. So I know that the sock portion right here is our variable, and it's opening this socket, which is the attacker IP and the port 443, and then after that it's executing the shell on that specific port, or on this specific identifier, which is identifier 3. And that's essentially it. That's really all we have over here to actually create that reverse shell using PHP. And then using the shell execute function would be another version that we could do this. And the first portion of this is very similar. So we have the sock variable, anything that has the $sign in front of it, and then it's followed by the equal sign. You can safely assume that this is a variable that's being created. And the value of this variable is this command right here that is opening the socket, and then it's opening it on the attacker's IP address on port 443, and then it's just going to execute using the shell execute command, and it's going to execute the shell on that identifier of 3, and it's going to send us the error messages and everything else, the input and the output going to the identifier 3. and a PHP reverse shell using the system function. So again, same thing, except just at the end we have the system function that creates that shell for us on identifier 3. Then we have PHP reverse shell using the pass-through function, and again, same thing at the very beginning, and now we just have the pass-through function at the end right here. And the pass-through function executes a command and sends raw output back to the browser. This is useful when working with binary data. And reverse shell using the popen function that opens a process file pointer, allowing the shell to be executed. Same thing. And then you just have that R at the end, which I believe would be for reverse, I think. And then we're going into Python, the Python language. So Python reverse shell by exporting environment variables. So first we export our rhost variable, which is going to be the attacker IP. So that's going to be our remote host variable. And then the export of the R port, the remote port. And then we're going to compile this series of commands that are going to be, this is essentially creating a Python script, except now you're just doing it in one line, which is, it can be overwhelming when you look at it, but we're first importing these various libraries. So you're importing the system, the socket, the OS, and the PTY library. And PTY, I think, is just to make things pretty. And then the first variable is the S variable, and then it's the socket module using the socket function. And then we have the S connect that starts actually connecting. So you do S variable, and then you create the socket. And then now we can say s.connect, which actually connects using the socket. And then it goes to the get environment from our OS library, the OS module that we imported. And then it's going to get the environment and pull in our host that we've created. And then it's also going to pull in the R ports that we created. And then it's going to run the rest of the command. And this is I would say the big portion of the script itself. So it sets the remote host and a port as the environment variable, and then creates a socket connection and duplicates the socket file descriptor for standard input output, which is what we see right here, OS duplicate, and then it takes the file descriptor for standard input and output. And so this is, out of everything that we've covered so far, it's the most complicated, but for some reason I actually was able to make sense of most of it, because like everything that I've done so far has been like the furthest extent of my programming knowledge is in Python. So thankfully I was actually able to understand most of that. Python reverse shell using the sub process module. So pretty much similar to the last one, but except in this particular case where we imported the system and socket and all of that stuff, we are importing socket, subprocess, and OS, and then you're then now creating your the S variable using the socket again, and the rest of this looks a little bit different because in this case we use socket and then we used the socket connection, but in this case we're passing several arguments into our socket, and then we establish our connection using the IP address and the port number, and then we create the duplication and everything else. So this is a little bit different, and then for some reason they imported the pretty Python or the pretty library at the very end of that, which I don't know why they did it that way, but this reverse shell uses subprocess to spawn a shell and set up a similar environment as the Python reverse shell by exporting environment variables command. And then we have the short Python reverse shell. So I wonder if this is actually shorter. I guess kind of. So Python compile, and then it's importing the OS and the pretty and the socket. And then again, it just uses the socket module with the socket function to create that. Then it goes and creates that connection using the attacker IP and the port number, and then it creates that duplication at the end of it. So technically, I guess that was a little bit shorter compared to all of the other ones. So this creates a socket using the S variable that we see at the very beginning right here. And then it connects to the attacker and redirects all of the input, output, and error to the socket using the OS duplicate. And then we have these various other ones as well. So Telnet is not an encrypted protocol, so it's usually not recommended to do this using Telnet because everything is pretty much for plain text and there's no encryption which hides what you're doing. But so there's the target TryHackMe. So this creates a named pipe using the MK50, which we've done earlier. and it connects to the attacker via telnet on the IP of attacker IP in port 443. So you see make temp right here, which is our initial variable, and then you have make FIFO, and then the telnet protocol that's actually using it, and then you would use your shell that sends your messages to this initial variable that was created at the top of it. And then we have the awk, which is the built-in ability for, from what I remember, awk is like a pattern recognition tool. So it's interesting that we can actually create shells with this. So it uses the awk's built-in TCP capabilities to connect to attacker IP, and it reads commands from the attacker and executes them. Then it sends the results back over the same TCP connection, and then we can see the code right here. I'm not going to start breaking down all of these things because this is beyond my depth, and I don't want to give you incorrect instructions. And then finally, we have BusyBox, which is the simplest of the code that we've seen so far, that combines the netcat listener, and then that executes the shell once it actually has done that connection. So very, very interesting so far. I mean, most of these things I was kind of struggling to try to explain them to you, so I do apologize if I incorrectly explained these things, but hopefully you were able to at least understand that you have a lot of different options for creating these shell listeners. So which Python module is commonly used for managing shell commands and establishing reverse shell connections in security assessments? The answer for that would be subprocess. What shell payload method in a common scripting language uses the execute, shell execute, system pass-through, and popen functions to execute commands remotely through a TCP connection? I believe that is PHP. Which scripting language can use a reverse shell by exporting environment variables and creating a socket connection? That was Python. Okay, so that's what we got. So now let's talk about the web shell, and then we're gonna jump into the actual practical exercises. And I gotta tell you, I'm a little bit nervous just based on the last task for the shell payloads. I was like, that was kind of like that was a lot to wrap my head around. Hopefully I explained it well enough and it didn't confuse you. But yeah, let's talk about web shells real quick. A web shell is a script that's written in a language supported by a compromised web server, and it executes commands through the web server itself. So it's usually a file that contains the code that executes the commands and handles the files, and it can be written within a compromised web application or service, making it difficult to detect, and it's very popular if you can actually pull it off. It can be written in PHP, ASP, JSP, and even the simple CGI scripts. And this usually requires that you upload the file into the web server in some capacity. So there needs to be some kind of an upload function where you can attach it and upload it, and then you'll be able to execute it. So this is an example PHP web shell. It's very, very simple. So if the get variable is set, then we can actually run the command line using that. So this can be saved into a file with the PHP extension like shell.php, and then uploaded into the web server by the attacker, exploiting vulnerabilities like the unrestricted file upload, file inclusion, command injection, among a variety of different other vulnerabilities that actually allow us to upload files. And after it's deployed in the server, it can be accessed through the URL where the web shell is located. So for example, if there is an uploads portion and then you get to see what is available inside of the uploads portion, you would just refer to your file as the file name that you've created. And then as we've observed, we need to provide a get method and the value of the variable command, which would then which should contain the command that the attacker wants to execute. So for example, if we want to execute the command who am I, the request of the URL would be the actual URL that contains the file, and then you do the question mark so you can start adding parameters to it. And the parameter for our case is the command itself. So the command would equal to whatever the value of that would be, which in this case is the command who am I. And then when you run this, the response inside of your web browser will be displayed to you. So for example, there's a lot of different versions of this, but the web shells that are actually available online for us, it would, I feel like there's a lot of them, especially if you go through like the exploit database or something. The power of these things depends on the web server, and it can result in web shells with lots of functionality, and it allows you to avoid detection at the same time. So some of the most popular web shells that can be found online are the Pony or Pony shell, and it's minimalistic single file PHP web shell that allows remote command execution. So you would actually technically be able to establish a remote connection, I believe, and then you'll be able to literally run the ls command to actually list the contents of the file. So let me see if I can zoom in for you a little bit. Once it's been established, you literally can actually, as if you were connected and you have a shell connection, like your terminal connection, you can run the ls command, you can run cd, you can go and create files, and pretty much everything else that would normally be available inside of a terminal, you can do using that, which is pretty insane. The B374K shell, it's a feature-rich PHP shell with file management and command execution, among other functionalities. And this is what this looks like. So it actually shows you the file system, which is insane to think about. And it also allows you to, I think, run commands as well inside of the shell. Very, 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 very interesting. C99, a well-known and robust PHP web shell with extensive functionality, and this is what this looks like right here. And you can actually execute commands, so you can enter the command and execute them, and you have a variety of different options as well. It's interesting that these things have like graphical interfaces, and you have drop down pages and all these things. And so in this particular case, it's listing the contents of a given location. And it's giving you the permissions of the files that are associated with it. And it's very, very interesting that these things can actually run the way that they do. It's kind of nuts, honestly. And it supports regular expressions. You can make files, make directories. All of these commands actually come pre-installed essentially for you. Very, very interesting. That's crazy. We can find more web shells at the HTTP. So what is it? R57 shell. .net index.php. So if we go and open this thing right here, oh my god, look at all these web shells, dude. That's pretty insane. That's insane that you could actually, there are so many of them. And you can of course go and freaking find even more on a database like the ExploitDB website. So holy cow. Okay, what vulnerability type allows attackers to upload a malicious script by failing to restrict the file type? So this was available up here. It's the unrestricted file upload, I believe. So unrestricted file upload would be the response for this. So unrestricted file upload. And what is a malicious script uploaded to a vulnerable web application to gain authorized access? That's our web shell. And with that, we can now move on to the practical task that we have here about the different types. And I think it should be the same machine that I have already launched. So we should be able to just run it on the same machine. Let's just read through the instructions real quick, and then we'll go and run the exercises. The virtual machine I have already started. It's using the same exact IP address, so I think it should be fine. This is the IP address that I've been assigned for my virtual machine. It says that after it's been launched, we can access the virtual machine on these IP addresses. So 8080 hosts the landing page, 8081 hosts the web application that's vulnerable to command injection, 8082 hosts the web application that's vulnerable to an unrestricted file upload. We can then use the attack box, which I've already done. You can also use your own Kali Linux machine if you want to, as long as you have access to the OpenVPN and you connect to the TryHackMe server through OpenVPN. And for the most part, that's pretty much all the instructions that we've been given. So now the first one is using a reverse or bind shell. Exploit the command injection vulnerability to get a shell. What is the content of the flag that's saved in the root directory? So first and foremost, I actually want to visit the web page. So let's see what it actually looks like. And it's going to be on port 8080. So we go there and it says unable to connect. So that's an issue. That's a problem right there. Let's see if maybe I need to kind of expire this, because this seems like uh, it would be the attack machine and its attack. Yeah, I feel like this is the one, but I'm just gonna terminate this one and then use the button that's available at the very end of this, which is the one right here, and then I'll launch this machine right here, and hopefully that'll be the one that'll work. Okay, cool. So we actually have this. So what do we have? We have the shell overview room. So reverse and bind shell task, and input a file, try hello.txt. And what does this do? It basically just takes us to the portal or the port that hosts the web application that's vulnerable to command injection. And from there, we can input a file, I guess, or essentially run the file. So if I create a reverse shell prompt and I can go ahead and put that in there, it should be able to technically work. So technically I could create this reverse shell prompt right here, for example, and then as long as I have a netcat listener that's listening on my machine, it should work. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create that netcat listener, and then I'm just going to run a similar command to the one that we saw, and hopefully it'll work. So let's see. So ncat lvnp 443, and now we are listening on port 443 using netcat. So let's go ahead and run this command. I'm basically just going to type this exactly with just certain modifications for the IP address for my attack box, which is the one that's been assigned to me up here, and the port, which is going to be port 443. So let's see if this works. Oh, wow, it actually worked. And I mean, literally all I did was do the ncat or netcat listener, and then I typed that command exactly as we saw. The only thing that I changed was I added the IP address for my attack box, and I put 443 as the port, but literally the command itself was exactly this command. So if you want to pause it and take a screenshot of this, or if you're already inside this room or whatever, this is literally the command that I used, and the attacker IP is the IP address of my attack box. So this would be the IP address of your computer. Let's say if you're using your own computer to do this, this would be the IP address of your computer, and then this would be the port number that was assigned when you created your netcat listener. So essentially whatever port number you assigned, that would be the port number that would accomplish this for you. So now the question that we have as the first one, it says, what is the flag that's saved in the root directory? So assuming that I can actually run this, if I would just do ls, it should work. And so print working directory, that would be the location. So it says hello.txt. That could potentially be the root directory, but I don't think it is, because we need to go up in our directory file hierarchy right here, and we go from HTML to var and just get all the way to the main root directory. So I would do cd and then just do that. And then if I do print working directory, there it is. And if I do ls, we can see that there is a flag that's right here. And I can just go ahead and concatenate that onto the screen. You can always just do cat and then do /flag like that as well from that first location. But I've already changed directory into this place, so I can just do that. And then there is the flag. So we can grab that whole piece and copy that whole piece, and then go ahead and paste it and submit it. So that's the first one. Now it says, using a web shell, exploit the unrestricted file upload vulnerability and get a shell. What is the content of the flag that's saved in the root directory? And what I'm going to end up doing is I'm just going to use the PHP version of this, because this is a very simple web shell that already exists for us. So I'm just going to create one. I'm going to close out of this connection that I have. I'm going to create this web shell real quick, and then I'm going to upload it to the file upload portion, and then hopefully that'll work as well. So we're just going to do nano, and then we're going to do shell.php, and then we're going to type this out real quick. Okay, I believe that's it. I mean, I could literally just, I should have just done this at the beginning, but I'm just gonna actually copy and paste this just to make sure I didn't misspell anything. That feels so silly because I could have just done that from the beginning and just copy and pasted that. I just like typing and I like hearing the click of my keyboard. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I did it that way. But I literally could have just done this to guarantee that there were no issues, which I just did do. So there we go. We're saving that file and we're now getting out of that. And now we have a shell file that is inside of our location here. So now I can go ahead and upload that shell file into our section right here where we have the web shell port. So now we're going to go ahead and browse for the file. We're going to go to our, what is it? It's in the root location, which is right here. And we will open that and then we're going to upload that. And so it says the file shell.php has been uploaded, and let's see where it would actually be located. In our hint, we actually get the location. So it says all files are stored in the uploads directory of the website. So if we go here and go here, I think we can just go to this piece right there and just do uploads. And let's see if we can, so it's forbidden, yeah, so my bad. So if I do uploads and do shell.php, and then we go ahead and feed the command into it where we do who am I, let's say, and it actually gives us who we are. So that did end up working. So now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find where that location is. So this is where I am right here, and I need to go ahead and change my directory into this should be interesting. So I think it's CD, and then if I just do a regular space and press enter, I think that should work. I feel like that did work. So let me now see or maybe I can do ls of the root directory, and okay, so it does work. So you can actually do space and everything like that. So this is the flag that is inside of this location. So now what we can do is we can just do a cat prompt or a cat command and then do /flag.txt, and there's the flag, just like that. So / or a cat space /flag.txt ends up getting us our result, and from there we just go ahead and paste that and we are officially done. So I mean, this was a pretty hefty room. I think this was very useful. There was a portion of it that I felt like was confusing, which is the portion where we were actually looking at all of the payloads. So hopefully I didn't confuse you. If there are questions that you have about that, you can always take those payloads and go to your favorite AI tool and ask it to explain the payload code for you. I just didn't want to do that because it would take up a lot of the time of this particular room. But they were just giving us a bunch of different examples of what you could potentially do to create a payload or a reverse shell, so on and so forth. So this is how you can establish connections to your targets using these various types of shells, so a reverse shell or a bind shell and everything like that. And in this particular case, we were attacking a web server that allows you to, it has that command injection vulnerability, or it has that file upload vulnerability. In a lot of cases, you don't know if these vulnerabilities exist, and through your reconnaissance and your research and scanning and looking at the versions of the web app and all of that stuff, that's how you find out if the web application actually has the vulnerability. And usually, for the most part, if you go to the common vulnerability database, like the CVE database from NIST, you actually will get to, they'll display, they'll be like, yeah, this version of this web server is actually vulnerable to these lists of vulnerabilities. And based on that, you can be like, oh, you know what, this will actually work. I can create some kind of a command injection prompt, or I can create some kind of reverse shell file, and I can upload it to that web server, and then I can get my shell or whatever. So this was very, for me specifically, even though I've done stuff like this before, this was a great reminder and a great review, and I learned a lot from it. So I hope you did too, and hopefully it wasn't confusing. When you go through line by line and piece by piece of code, I can understand that it can be confusing, especially if you've never done it before. So I hope that didn't discourage you. I hope you still went through this exercise and you were still able to learn based on what we went through. So Reverse shells are very, very powerful. Bind shells are powerful. Web shells are powerful, as you just saw. The reverse shell establishes a connection from a compromised machine back to your attacker machine. Bind shells, on the other hand, listen for an incoming connection on an incoming machine, and then you go from the attacking machine and you try to get that connection. And then the web shell offers the attacker a unique avenue for exploiting vulnerabilities in web applications, which is precisely what we just did in our practical exercise. So I hope you actually got a lot of value from this, and let's do some final notes and it will be done. If you did get value from this video, I do encourage you to like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out in the CySec101 training series, as well as the stuff that's coming out in the future for Network Plus, which is the very next piece that's going to come out. And then after that, there's going to be the AI integrations of security appliances, where we actually mesh together, where we integrate AI tools with security tools to create security officers and things like that that are automated. And it's very important because the future is all about AI and robots and things like that. So you need to know how to do that if you're going to be inside of the tech world and inside of cybersecurity. So you can drop a comment if you have any questions about what just went on, because I do realize, again, I realize it may have been a little bit confusing, just a little bit. But if you just want to say hi, if you want to say thanks, all that stuff is good. So make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on notification bell. Like, subscribe, turn on notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out. Drop a comment if you just want to say hi, if you have any questions, if you want to say thanks. And you can also say thanks by supporting this channel and joining Hackaholics Anonymous, the premier community for security professionals and hackers. We have 4 tiers: the supporter, agent, guardian, and master. Each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The agent, guardian, and master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every single month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below. You can go to our homepage and click the join button there, or you can go to youtube.com/@hackhackshackers/join, and you'll be able to join Hackaholics Anonymous. I hope I see you in the Discord servers. If not, I hope I see you in the comment section. And that is it for today. It's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite network and system attacker/protector. Love, peace, and chicken grease. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you, and I'll see you in the next video later. In episode 38 of the CySec101 training series, we are going to go through SQLMap, the basics of SQLMap, which helps us do SQL injection, because obviously we are still in the OffSec tooling, the offensive security tooling portion of the Cybersecurity 101 pathway of TryHackMe. And SQLMap and SQL injection are one of the top the OWASP top 10 vulnerability exploits that still exist, and I think they're still going to exist as we go into the 2025 version of OWASP, the OWASP top 10 list. So this is a big one. This is a very important one. This is the last room in the offensive security tooling module of the Cybersecurity 101 pathway of TryHackMe. And as a part of this, we're going to obviously go through the intro. It's just a few tasks. It's nothing crazy. There's the SQL injection vulnerability that we're just going to go over so that you know what it actually is. Then the automated SQL injection tool, which is SQLMap. And then, of course, we're going to do the practical exercise. And that'll be it for today's video. So without further ado, if you'd like to support the channel, consider joining Hackaholics Anonymous, the premier community for security professionals and hackers. We have 4 tiers: the supporter, agent, guardian, and master. Each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The agent, guardian, and master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every single month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below. You can go to our homepage and click the join button there, or you can go to youtube.com/@hackhackshackers/join, and you'll be able to join Hackaholics Anonymous. Now, without further ado, let us jump into the SQLMap room. SQL injection has been a big concept in cybersecurity essentially ever since databases have been around. SQL injection attacks have also been around, and they're a big topic in cybersecurity because you can access so much sensitive data. You can access your customers' usernames and passwords. Obviously, if they have their credit card information on file with you, you can access that. There is so much data that leaves a business at risk that if they actually do get hacked, there's a really big liability that is available, that if I steal, your customer data, you are now bound to get sued. You're now bound to get fined by whatever regulatory environments that's actually a part of your compliance. There's so much stuff that goes on that is stored inside of a database. So we need to first understand what an actual database is. And we did the introduction to SQL as a part of the CySec101 training series. So if you're actually in this playlist on YouTube right now, you can actually go to the SQL introduction and see what that is. And we do a good amount of practical exercises in that video as well. So at the very least, you'll have a really good understanding of that. But I'm just going to give you kind of like a crash course, a real quick overview of what the SQL databases are. So SQL stands for the Structured Query Language, and it's essentially a way that we communicate with a database. It's the programming language for storing and processing information in something called a relational database. And this is how essentially databases can kind of compile information together, so you can have multiple databases that pull data from each one, and then you can combine the information of those databases to create like a full profile for a customer. So therefore, there's a relationship that is established between various databases. So a relational database stores information in tabular form with rows and columns representing different data attributes and the various relationships between those data values. And you can use SQL statements to store, update, remove, search, and retrieve information from the database. And you can also use SQL to maintain and optimize database performance. So that's what SQL specifically is. Now, a database is a collection of data that can be stored, modified, retrieved, and it stores data from several applications in a structured format, hence the name Structured Query Language, which makes storage, modification, and retrieval easy and efficient. You can interact with websites daily, and you probably do, and the website contains some of the web pages where user input is required. So for example, if a login page is there and it asks you to enter your credentials, once you enter them, it checks if those credentials are actually in their database, and if they're correct, then it'll log you in. So many users log into that website, and how that website records all these users' data and verify it during the authentication process is the key question. And this is all done with the help of a database. So the websites have databases that store user and other information, and they are retrieved when they're needed. So when you enter your credentials to a website's login page, the websites interact with its database to check to see if those credentials exist and if they are correct. And if they are, you get access. So if you have an input field to search for something, for instance, the input field of a bookstop website or a bookshop website, allows you to search for the available books for sale. And when you search for any book, the website will interact with the database of that library or of that bookshop to fetch the record of that book and then display it on the site for you. So now that we know what that the website asks the database to retrieve, store, and modify data, so how does this interaction actually take place? And this is done through the database management system. And there's MySQL, there's PostgreSQL, SQLite or SQLite, Microsoft SQL Server. There are also a variety of different ones as well, MariaDB and things like that. So these systems understand the SQL, the Structured Query Language. So any application or website that uses SQL queries when interacting with a database. That's kind of the gist of this. So if there's a database, the application or the website uses SQL queries to interact with that database. So a user will send some kind of a request to the web server. The web server will check the database server, and it will use the SQL language to do so. And then from there, it'll pull back the data. So in this particular case, we actually, let me see if I can zoom in on this. I can't. So essentially, you send some kind of a request, and then the web server will send an SQL query. So, it's trying to access something right here, and then it says select everything from users where ID equals 1, which would presumably be the ID of the user. And then that was a query that you saw, that select asterisk from users. That's a very common syntax that we see inside of SQL. So this room will teach us the basics of SQL injection and how to use automated tools to carry out SQL injection. It will also dive practically into the topic through a hands-on challenge, and that's the part of the whole thing that we're going to go through. So we're going to talk about SQL injection vulnerability and then hunting SQL injection through the SQLMap tool. And then, of course, we're going to go through that practice exercise. So While having a solid SQL fundamental knowledge is helpful, it's not required to complete this room. And in case you're just interested in it, there is the intro to SQL, the SQL fundamentals room or video that's a part of the CySec101 playlist that you're in right now, and it was under our web hacking portion, but it's inside of the CySec101 playlist. And this piece, all of these things that you see right here with these check marks right here, I've already done this. It's already inside of the CySec101 playlist. So in case you're interested and you want a really strong foundation, which I think you should get because it's just a really, really important knowledge base. So if you complete this room, and then you want to go and get a solid foundation anyway, you can just go through that fundamentals room and you will be great. You'll be solid. So which language builds the interaction between a website and its database? And it's 3 letters, SQL. And that is our first question for the day. So let us now go into the concept of the SQL injection vulnerability. So now that we understand what SQL is, we understand what a database is, we're going to talk about this specific vulnerability, which is a really big vulnerability if you actually find it on a website. And of course, there's a note here that it says, before we proceed, please ensure that you try the manual or automated SQL injection methods only after you actually have permission from the application owner, because when you do penetration testing or any kind of hacking without the permission of the owner, that is actually a felony. So apart from doing damage because you, for whatever reason, maybe you're not fully well read into this and you may just do some things that may actually cause harm to that business or that website. Apart from that, there's also the fact that it's illegal, and then if it tracks back to you, which most likely they can because it's a part of their job to do digital forensics and to do the investigations to find the IP address and then the location and all of that. It's a pretty big deal, and if they catch you or when they catch you, you'll be in a whole lot of trouble. So let's take an example of a login page that asks you to enter the username and password. And so we have username John, password is this, right? Once you enter the username and password, the website will receive it, and then it'll make an SQL query with your credentials and then send it to the database. And so this is the SQL query. It says select everything. So this asterisk represents anything and everything, right? It's a wildcard character. So usually in programming languages, it just represents anything, right? So select anything or everything from the user's database or the user's table, we should call it, where the username equals John and the password equals da 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 da, and then you have to put that semicolon at the end, otherwise the query will not work. So that's what the website sends, where it's checking the actual user's table and it's checking the entry where the username is John and the password is this. So that and is the operator that requires both of these conditions have to be true in order for this to work. Now, if there is no username John, it's going to say, login credential incorrect. If the password is incorrect by a single character or some kind of a, the U is lowercase instead of uppercase, whatever, then it'll say login credentials incorrect. So when you say username and password, that means that both of those conditions have to be true in order for this person to be able to log into the website. So it'll be executed in the database, this query right here. And as per this query, the database will check for the username John and the password of that. If it finds such a user, it will return the user's detail to the application. And the above query will be successful only if the given username and pass both have a match together in the database, as they're separated by the Boolean and, also known as an operator. Sometimes when input is improperly sanitized, meaning that the user input is not validated, and it could be either through your browser on the host level, the client level, or it could be on the server level from the actual website. In either of those situations, there could be a lack of sanitization, or where there's no validation taking place. Attackers can actually manipulate the input and write a SQL query that would get executed in the database and then perform whatever the action is that we want to pull. So SQL injection has a very harmful effect in this digital world, as all of the organizations store their data, including their critical information, inside databases, and a successful SQL injection attack can compromise their critical data. So let's assume the website login page we discussed above lacks input validation and sanitization. This means that it is vulnerable to the SQL injection, and the attacker does not know the password of the user John. They will type the following input in the given fields. They'll say user John, and then password, it'll be ABC, and then there's a single quote, or 1 equals 1, and then you have that semicolon at the end, and then we have these series of dashes. So this is truly an injection attack. Now, the way that this breaks down, right? So they put some kind of a random string first, and then they have this quote, space, or 1 equals 1. And 1 equals 1 will always yield true, right? So that's the thing. So it's like either this is the case, right? So this is the password, or 1 equals 1. And the SQL database is going to look at that, and it's going to say, okay, this is not true, but this part is true. 1 does equal 1. And so that will actually yield to true. And since it says or, it'll say either this one is true or this one is true. And if either of those is true, then give me access, right? So username is John, password is not going to be correct, but this condition will actually be correct, right? So the SQL query that actually the website would send to the database would be very similar to what we had before. And then the password portion changes a little bit. And it says password equals, notice that the first quotation is not something that we put here because the website, the server, is actually going to do that for us. And then the second portion of it includes that closing quotation, which is something that we need to actually put. And then or 1 equals 1, and then semicolon. And then we have these couple of dashes right here that also is wrapped with that one single quote that is available over there. And then there's a semicolon. So this is what the web server actually creates for us, right? So this is the query that the web server creates. So notice that there are a few pieces that we didn't include that at the end of it, the web server actually did include and it created. So let's actually break this down and look at the details. So it looks similar to the previous query, but now we actually have another condition, which is that is included with the operator of or. So this will see if there is a user John, and then it'll check if John has password ABC, which obviously he doesn't. Ideally, the query should fail here because it expects both the username and password to be correct, as there is an AND operator between them. But this query has another condition, which is the OR operator between the password and the statement 1 equals 1. And any one of those things being true will make the whole SQL query successful. So the password failed, obviously, because it's just a random password. So the query will check the next condition, which is if 1 equals 1. As we know, 1 does equal 1. So 1 equals 1 is actually going to be a true statement. So it's going to ignore the random password entered before it, and it'll consider the statement as true, which will successfully execute the query, which is the actual query that we have, meaning pulling John's information. Now the dashes, right? So the dash dash space dash at the end of the query would comment anything after 1 equals 1, which means that the query would be successfully executed and the attacker would get logged into John's account. So anything that comes after that 1 equals 1 just becomes commented, meaning that it's not a part of the code. It will not execute as code. When you comment something in any language, that means you are essentially nullifying whatever comes after that. So one of the most important things to note is that there's the use of a single quote after ABC, and without the single quote, the whole string right here would be considered the password, which is not intended. However, if we add a single quote after ABC, the password would then look like this, which is what we saw in the actual query itself. And then or 1 equals 1, and then we have the semicolon, and then we have these 3 dashes followed by another quote which then encloses the original string ABC in the query and allows us to introduce a logical condition, which is or 1 equals 1, which is always going to end up being true, right? So 1 will always equal to 1, therefore that will end up being true, and even if the password is incorrect. So even if we just put random jargon as the password and this ends up being false, 1 will always equal 1. So if we say this or this, that means if either of these conditions is true, let me in. right, allow this query to actually be successful, which ends up working. So which Boolean operator checks if at least one side of the operator is true for the condition to be true? And that, my friends, is OR. And then do we have another one? Is 1 equal 1 in an SQL query always true? And of course, the answer to that is yeah, because 1 always will equal 1. All right, so now we can actually talk about the automated SQL injection tool. So we know what SQL injection is, we know what a database is, we know what SQL language is. So now there's an actual injection tool that we're going to talk about. As we already established, SQL injection involves actually discovering the SQL injection vulnerability in an application and then manipulating that database. Manually doing all this can take a lot of time and effort because you would have to keep going with trial and error. So that's why hackers developed SQLMap, which is a free and open source penetration testing tool that automates finding and exploiting SQL injection vulnerabilities on web applications. It can extract data from databases, execute commands on the underlying operating system, and even take control of the target server. Of course, there's a tool that has already been developed for something like this, right? So SQLMap is the automated tool for detecting and exploiting SQL injection vulnerabilities in web applications. It simplifies the process of identifying these vulnerabilities, and it's built into some Linux distros, but you can easily install it if you don't have it in your Linux distro. As this is a command line tool, you must open the Linux OS terminal and use it. The help command will list all the available flags that you can use. If you don't want to manually add the flags to each command, you can always use the wizard flag with SQLMap. When you use this flag, the tool will guide you through each step and ask questions to complete the scan, making this the perfect option for beginners. This is actually amazing that this even exists. This is the first time I've ever heard of this existing inside of a command line tool. You always see wizards inside of like an installation software or something like that. When you're using a GUI, like a graphical user interface, you'll always see some kind of a wizard that'll guide you, but I have never seen one inside of a command line tool, which is really freaking cool. Very, very convenient. So what do we got? We got SQLMap wizard as the command, and then this kind of launches right here. Text has been removed for whatever reason, so I guess maybe they don't want us to have it just in case they ask questions about it. And then it'll say, starting the wizard interface, please enter the full target URL, which is the -u flag in this case. The -dbs flag, --dbs flag, helps you to extract all database names. Once you get to know the database names, you can extract information about the tables of that database by using capital D, database name, and then doing tables. After obtaining the tables, if you want to enumerate the records in those, you can do capital D, database name, capital T, table name, and then do --dump, which will get you all of the fields, right? All of the columns and all of the records. And then the different flags in SQLMap let you extract detailed information from the database. Now we can take a practical scenario and use all of those above flags. So the first step is to look for a possible vulnerable URL or request. You may often come across some URLs that use the get parameters to retrieve data. So for example, a URL like http sqlmaptesting.thm/search, and then the question mark where like the query starts actually fitting into it. So the query in this possible case, or in this potential case, is the cat equals 1. That's our actual query. So it uses a parameter cat and then takes the value of 1. And if you see any web application using the get parameters in the URLs to retrieve data, you can test that URL with the U flag in SQLMap. And this is considered to be HTTP GET-based testing. This approach is followed when the application uses the get parameters in the actual URL to retrieve data from the searches, which again has a lot to do with how they've configured their website. So if it shows you the request that's being made inside of the URL, that is misconfigured website. It's something that is leaving a vulnerability for that website to be exploited. So we'll use the supposedly vulnerable website URL, which is the http sqlmaptesting.thm for demonstration. Suppose that this website has a search option, and when you click on the search option and search for something, the URL becomes this, and then you have search, and then this would be the aftermath of it. So this uses the get parameter and then it gets the cat equals 1 in the URL to extract information from the database. As we know, URLs that have the get parameters can be vulnerable to SQL injection. So let us scan this URL to identify if it has any SQL injection vulnerability. So you'll do SQLMap, and then you feed it the URL, and you give it the full URL, including the query at the end of it. And then you run it, and it says testing connection, get parameter cat appears to be MySQL 5.0, and then cat is generic union legacy, and then parameter cat, Boolean based, error based, and or time based, union query. The backend is MySQL web server operating system, . So the results above terminal show us that different types of SQL injection like Boolean based blind, error-based, time-based blind, and union query are identified in the target URL. These are different techniques for exploiting an SQL injection vulnerability. For example, in the Boolean-based blind SQL injection, the SQL query is modified, and a Boolean expression that is always true, for example, 1 equals 1, is included in the query to extract the information, whereas the error-based SQL injection, some queries are intentionally modified to generate errors in the results sent by the database. These errors often contain valuable information about the data. Similarly, other SQL injection techniques can also be employed to exploit a database. So the results from that command that we executed on this particular target tells us that different types of SQL injection are possible in the URL. So let's use the flags, which we studied earlier, to exploit them and extract some valuable information. So we're going to use the DBS flag, and let's try it out. So we will do SQLMap U, and then we give it the full URL, and then we just do DBS to actually pull all of the databases. And so what do we get? We get the backend DBMS is MySQL web server operating system, and then we have available databases, users and members, right? So we get to see that we have these two various databases. So now we can select the user's database by using the capital D flag, and then use the tables flag at the end of that to extract all the tables for that database. So it looks just like this. The first portion is exactly the same. Then we have capital D users and then -- tables, and it pulls all of the tables for us. And then we see at the bottom right here, we have the John, Ath, Alexis, and Thomas. So we have 3 tables, and this is what they are named. So now that we have all the available table names of the database, let's dump the records. And for example, the Thomas table. So to do so, we'll define the database with the D flag, then the T flag will give us the actual table that we're going to use, and then we're going to use the dump flag to extract all the data. So again, the first portion of the query is going to look exactly the same, and then we'll do D users, T Thomas, and then we just do dump. And if we go to the bottom of this whole thing, we'll see that there is one entry for Thomas, and it's going to be the date, the name, and then the password for Thomas, which is the Thomas THM username, and then the password is testing. So unlike the URL used for testing above, you can also use the post-based testing, where the application sends data in the request body instead of the URL. So examples of this could be login forms, registration forms, etc. To follow this approach, you must intercept a post request on the login or registration page and save it as a text file. You can use the following command to input the request that's saved in the text file to SQLMap. So SQLMap R, and then read that intercepted request. And learning how to intercept and capture post requests is out of the scope for this room, and it can be done with a tool like Burp Suite, which is, we also have multiple videos in the CySec101 playlist that will actually teach you how to use Burp Suite. So in case you want to learn how to do that, you can just go watch those videos. I feel like we're not going to end up using it in this particular room in this video that we're going through, so I believe we're just going to use everything else that we've learned so far. So now it says, which flag in the SQLMap tool is used to extract all the databases that is available? So all of the databases that are available, and what we're going to do is going to be the, I think it's DBS, right? So --DBS is the flag. And then what would be the full command of SQLMap for extracting all tables from the members database? And the vulnerable URL is this. So we'll do, I'm just going to copy that. And then we're going to do SQLMap, and then we're going to do -u, and then we're going to paste the actual URL. Oops, I accidentally, there we go. We're going to paste the actual URL, and then it's going to be -d for the database, and then we're going to do members, and then we're going to do -- dump, right? Vulnerable for extracting all tables from, oh no, so tables, not dump yet. So we want tables. So we're going to use database members and then dash tables, and then we're going to pull all of the tables. And then once we have that, we would do dash capital T, give the name of the table, and then take the dump to actually get all of the data from that table. So that is it. And now we can actually jump into our practical exercise. All right, so we actually get a little bit of an instruction for this practical exercise. Usually they just kind of throw us in the deep end here. So number one, I've already started the attack box. I've already started the virtual machine that's available for me. And I think, is this a free room? No, this is a subscriber only room. So you do actually need a paid subscription to TryHackMe, but there is a link in the description below that'll actually give you a discount on your TryHackMe subscription. So if you ever wanted to do it, you can definitely go ahead and use that link to actually get yourself a discount. Now, you can just do this against any website that you know and you have permission to be able to use SQLMap on. Maybe you have your own website that you can use some kind of like a little database installation on and just kind of mess around with it like that. But please don't do this if you don't have permission. It's always better to use a service like TryHackMe to be able to do all of these exercises in a controlled environment. So we are going to use the attack box for this. The web application that we want is assigned to us at this specific IP address, and then the endpoint is AI/login. When we go here, we'll see this web page, and we know based on the instructions that this is actually vulnerable to that injection exploit. So we saw that if we see a get parameter in the URL, they might be vulnerable to SQL injection, and we can copy that URL to use it with SQLMap. We also saw if that there's a post request and the data is sent inside the body rather than the URL, we can intercept the request and use it with SQLMap tool to exploit an SQL injection if there is any. Now, in this task on the login page, we have to use a get request, but the parameters of this request are not visible in the URL as they were on the previous task. So to test this with SQLMap, we need to first have the URL. And to be able to do this, we can just right click on the page and do the inspect option. And it's available pretty much in every browser. So right here, I'm using Chrome, and we're gonna end up using Firefox for this, but literally when you right click on anything, it'll just show you the inspect option. And then when you do that, it'll show you source code, right? So it'll literally show you what's available inside of this website's source code. So we see all of these things, and as we kind of scroll over any of them, it highlights those various elements of the page. And there's a lot of different extra categories or extra options when you actually do inspect, where you see different portions of that source code where you can kind of get different data. And there's even a console where you can inject JavaScript into it. Again, I'm kind of digressing, but inspect is one of your best tools for this, right? So from here, we have to select the network tab, and then we have to enter some test credentials and the username and password and click the login button, and then we'll be able to see the get request. So we can then click on that request and see the completed request with the parameters, and then we copy that URL and then use SQLMap to do it. So this is what it looks like when you actually have, when you've clicked on that and you've clicked on inspect. When you click on inspect, you go to the network section. This is specific to Firefox. So I wonder if I actually do this, if we also have a network section for Chrome. We do. We actually do have a network section for Chrome as well. And it also shows you all of the requests that are being made. So in my particular case, for example, TryHackMe, there's a lot of requests being made to TryHackMe, right? So in this case, when we actually do this, we go to the network tab, and then we see that there's a request, right? So there's a status of 200, it's a get method, and the domain name, which is the IP address, and then the file, which is this piece right here. But then we need the full URL. So if we actually go under the headers portion, you'll see that there's a get request being made, and this is the actual full URL. So it has the IP, AI, includes user login, which is the email, and then the user login, and then we have the email parameter having the value of test, and then we have the password parameter having the value of test, and then that's basically what it shows us right here. And so, I mean, it says that it's a successful, the 200 status is what we got, but I don't think test and test would actually log anybody in. So in this particular case, this is what the full URL ends up looking like. And so we run the commands that discussed in a previous task and answer the questions given in this task. Also remember to include the URL inside the single quotes. This is to avoid any errors with special characters in the terminal. For example, the question mark that we see here. And you may not get the results by the simple scan. Add the level 5 at the end of your commands to perform in-depth scans. Secondly, while running the commands, the tool may ask you some questions. Make sure to respond to them as follows. So it looks like the back end is DBMS is MySQL. Do you want to skip test payloads specific to the other ones? Yes or no, right? For the remaining tests, you want to include all the tests for MySQL scanning, and it will say yes. Injection not exploitable with null values. Do you want to try with a random integer value? And then you'll say yes. And get parameter email is vulnerable. Do you want to keep testing with others? And then you can say no, because I guess the email parameter itself is vulnerable. So they're they're giving us a lot of like instructions to actually make this work for us, which it's nice. It's nice to actually be able to do that. So I am going to first load the browser, and then from there, we'll just go through the exercise. All right, so here's the page, and this is the IP address /AI/login. And so if we do test, and then we do test, press enter, and it'll say what, like continue, and it'll say there was an error. And then so if I do inspect, let's see if we can actually go and find that. And then we're going to click on network, and then we're going to go down here. So if we can actually see any of this stuff to perform a request. Network filter URLs, let's see, HTML. Okay, got it. So first we actually had to click inspect and then get to the network tab and then do test, and then click login. And then so it'll say error, and then something actually showed up down here when I did that. And so now what I need to do is I need to go ahead and find this. So I'm going to actually go into full screen mode here, just so we can get a little bit better of a view that we have available over here. So the location was under the network tab, as they mentioned. And then when we look at it, there is the all, and then we have headers. So let me go ahead and click on all. And there it is. This is what we got over here. Under all, we have this piece, and then we can see that. And then I need headers now. So there we go. So if you actually click on the item, it'll bring this other portion where you see headers. And so this is how you would get the full URL. So that's actually our full URL. So I'm just going to copy this, and that will be what we will use for SQLMap. Now, we are going to actually go into SQLMap, and we're going to run the previous commands that we had over here just to kind of mess around and try to find something. So this is the URL. The full URL is what we're going to give it, and then we're just going to see if we can find any vulnerability. So I will do SQLMap-U and then paste, and then just press enter, and there it goes. It starts running, and it says testing connection to the target URL. You have not declared cookies. Do you want to use those? So I'll just say yes. Then it's going to say SQLMap AI includes test, and it's been one logged. Do you want to use those? So command not found. Okay. Maybe it's because I didn't use an uppercase Y. Maybe that's what it is. So let's do this one more time. Do you want to use those? We'll do an uppercase Y. Press enter. And it still said command not found. That's very interesting. So SQLMap-U, and then we gave it the URL, and it's for whatever reason saying that our command was not found. So you've not declared cookies while server wants to set its own, which is this piece right here. Do you want to use those? And this is the actual command that they used. So that seems to be fine. They didn't have any other issues. And in the instructions that we had right here, did it give us anything about cookies? It says, do you want to skip payloads? Nope, it didn't even. Oh, you know what? I should have actually did the dash level 5. So that's the one piece that I did not do. So let's try that one more time. And then we're just going to do level equals 5. Press enter, and let's see what we have. So it says still the same thing with the cookies. We'll do yes. And it still says command not found. So this is actually getting annoying now. All right, so based on the hint, it's saying to just jump into it by using the DBS flag and then go to level 5 for extracting all of the available databases. So we're assuming that we actually have the vulnerability, and it tells us that the email parameter is vulnerable. So I guess we're literally just going to jump into it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the portion or that one command where it actually starts kind of digging into the databases, which is what we see right here, right? So I'll literally just do this. I'll go level 5, and then I'll do DBS, and then we'll run it. And let's see, it says declared cookies. And let's see if it still gives me the same issue. So we'll do yes, and the freaking thing has stopped. So this is what's really, really obnoxious now, because for whatever reason, this is actually not working. So let me just do, I'll do DBS first, and then I'll do level equals 5, and then run it like that. And do you want to use that? And it's still giving me this issue with testing connection, and then you haven't declared cookies. So how about this? We'll do this time, and then we'll just say, no, I don't want to declare cookies. And it still stops it. So now I have to do some real troubleshooting here. All right, so there's something else that I also ended up missing, which is putting the URL inside of the quotes, which I did not do. So I will go ahead and do that one more time, and I believe maybe that might be my issue. So we'll go ahead and paste the URL inside of those single quotes. Then we'll do DBS, and then we'll do level equals 5. Then press enter. And look at that. Wouldn't you know, it actually started working. So it was a very silly mistake of not including the freaking URL inside of the quotes. Okay, so now we actually have another question here. So it says, do you want to skip the test payloads specific for other DMSs because it looks like the backend DMS MySQL heuristic extend test could be MySQL. It looks like the backend Do you want to skip test payloads for other ones? So we'll do yes. And it says for the remaining tests, do you want to include all tests for MySQL extending provided risk? We'll do yes. And let's see what else we get. We had another question. It says, do you want to retry to find proper union column types with fuzzy test? We have the target URL appears to have 4 columns in the query. Order by technique appears to be usable, so on and so forth. I guess I'll just retry this one more time, but if that ends up not being something, then we'll go through it. Injection not exploitable with null values. Do you want to try with the random integer value for option? And that was the one that we also want to say yes to. And let me make sure I actually click yes for this. And then it says injection not exploitable with null values. Do you want to try it with a random integer? I think I did that. Didn't I just do that? Yes. Okay. And let's see. And there we go. We arrived at get parameter email is vulnerable. Do you want to keep testing? So we're going to say no to this one based on what we got. And there we go. We have available databases, AI, information schema, MySQL, performance schema, PHP MyAdmin, and test. So that it is a total of 6 databases that we have. So the answer to the first question would be 6. Now it says, what is the name of the table available in the AI database? So now what we can do is we can essentially just now continue from where we have and just keep going deeper into this specific query that we have, just to start pulling some tables with it, right? So now it's the actual database name that I have, which is AI. And then again, same exact link, right? So everything is going to be the same. Now I'm actually going to use database for AI, and then now I'm going to pull the tables. So we will do, I think I can just go up here and then I can just modify this. So instead of doing DBS right here, I can do D, and then that's going to be AI, and then we will do tables like that. So that's what the full command is going to look like. And just remember, again, the URL needs to be inside of the quotation to make sure that that question mark doesn't mess us up or anything like that. So now we're going to do SQLMap, and then we're going to have the URL. Then we're going to do --D, and then AI is going to be the table, or the database, excuse me. And we're going to do --tables, and then I'm still going to do level 5 just to make that run. So what do we have here? Now it says no such option --D. Oh yeah, so it's supposed to be just one -D. So no 2 dashes for this, and let's run that. And so it says we have user as one of our tables that is available for the AI. So what does this say here? What is the name of the table? It's going to be user. Now, what is the password of the email test at chat AI. So now we're going to expand on this, and it's going to be dash D AI and then dash T user, and then we're going to do dump dash dump. So that was the command. So there's the response. So just to show you the query, we have SQLMap dash U, we give it the full URL, we do dash capital D AI dash capital T user, and then we did dash dump, and then I still kept the level 5. And there we got. So we got one ID, which is the test at chat AI created on here, and this is their password. So we're going to copy that and come over here and paste that, and we are officially done with our SQL map. And that was it. I mean, that was honestly, it was pretty fun, not hard at all. So I need to generate a badge for this, because apparently I got a badge, and it's really fun to be able to share these badges. So that is it for our specific video. The SQL map tool is very, very fun to use. It's very functional, as we just saw. The hardest part about it was to essentially make sure that I put the freaking URL inside the quotes. And apart from that, everything else was super easy to use. It's really, really crazy when you think about the fact that SQL injection can be automated like this. And as long as you know what URL you want to attack, it'll just attack it for you and then find whatever the vulnerabilities are. And then based on that, you can just run the rest of the exercises and get the databases, get the tables, get the values of the tables. Really, really crazy stuff. Like, this is a really powerful tool. I've never used SQLMap before, so I'm super excited that this actually exists, and it gives me all kinds of ideas, you know what I mean? But for the most part, I'm super excited that we actually were able to get this done. So hopefully you were able to run along this with me, and you were able to also get these results, and hopefully it was actually useful for you and you had some fun with it. If you found this video useful and you would like to get more videos like this one in the CySec101 training series, then I do encourage that you like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out, especially in CySec101. But then there's Network Plus that's coming out, and then there's also the AI integration with security tools. That's another training series that's going to come out. So there's a lot of really, really crazy stuff that's going to be coming out on this channel, and we're just going to get more and more crazy as we go into the content, because once the fundamentals, once the foundations are set, we're gonna review a lot of really, really cool concepts in cybersecurity and hacking and information technology, programming, all of that stuff. I nerd out about all of these things. So I feel like the best kind of instructor is the person who actually really enjoys talking about these things. And I literally nerd out over this kind of stuff. So I definitely enjoy it. And I very much hope that you kind of can feel that energy and you can get that so that you can go ahead and develop your skill set and have fun as we do it. So drop a comment if you have any questions about the video that we went through today, or if you just want to say hi. And of course, make sure that you like, subscribe, turn on that notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out. Drop a comment. I'm very active in the comment section. If you have any questions, if you just want to say hi, if you want to say thanks. And you can also say thanks by supporting this channel and joining Hackaholics Anonymous, the premier community for security professionals and hackers. We have 4 tiers: the supporter, agent, guardian, and master. Each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The agent, guardian, and master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, bug bounties, live streams with me every single month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below, or you can go to our homepage and click the join button there, or you can go to youtube.com/@HankHacksHackers/join, and you'll be able to join Hackaholics Anonymous. I hope I see you in the Discord servers. If not, I hope I see you in the comment section, and that's it. It's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers. If you're a network and system attacker/protector, if no one else loves you, Hank loves you. Love, peace, and chicken grease. And I'll see you in the next video later.